Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Studio. This show is brought to you by the letters USB. USB, as you probably know, is computer shorthand for Universal Sanity Breaker. And it's been doing a swell job on me. Anyway, we're here. We're back. Why? Why are we late? Well, I don't know. It's the same procedure every week. Touch the same buttons every week. This time, for some reason, there was a little check mark on the Twitch feed that was not off before. It was off this time, so it took me a few minutes, and I'm tired of the whole thing. I'm just going to get into broadcast TV. I'm going to buy myself I'm going to buy ABC or CBS or something that's just turn it on and go. Anyway, sorry about the late start. Here we are. So tonight we got some new colony kind of discussion type things, and had a chance to get a lot of sleep over the last several days, which has helped a lot. So I went out and pulled a couple clips because there's some interesting news on the workflow on the giant bugaboo for all CG animation, and especially lower end CG animation. When I say lower end, I mean, a small studio as opposed to these guys with $400 million, $300 million budgets and teams of 200 and, 7 years to get it done. Unreal Engine has released version 5.2. Normally, these point upgrades don't really interest me much. There's usually some small improvement of this or that. But in the 5.2 upgrade, the people that make MetaHumans announced that there was finally a new MetaHuman update. And there have been it's an entirely new procedure, which is kind of exciting. I'm going to talk to you guys about. So that is, I think, probably where we'll start out today. Who knows where we'll end up? I have been watching. I have been watching a little bit of the Apollo 11 first episode that they put on YouTube again, thank goodness. And the comments have been off the hook crazy, and it's the second time I decided I was just going to watch just a few minutes of it and end up couldn't really take my eyes off of it, which has me thinking some thoughts about future content, which we'll talk about after this. So anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. It's just soul destroying, right? So here's the latest. The big problem we have with something like the colonies is, do you do the whole thing CG? Do you do the whole thing live? Do you do a mix of live and CG? The whole thing live is just completely out of the budget question in terms of the amount of sets. Even a show like The Expanse, I thought, had pretty crummy sets. And so that's just out of the question. Doing live and CG, kind of like the little clips that we did from the Empire of Terror, where we build a practical set with a CG background and we project that onto that super high resolution LED screen. That's pretty cool. That's workable, but you've still got basically two problems here. You've got to do not only a computer graphics studio and get that up and running, you also have to do a live action studio, get that up and running, and then you've got to be pretty selective. You still have a bunch of sets to build. You got costume issues, you got all of it. So I think probably the way, obviously, to go with this kind of thing is to do the whole thing CG, because then all you need is a good animation studio. But the problem there continues to be, for me and for other people like Daily Wire, who've expressed some interest in this project, among others. The problem there is that everything looks great except for the humans. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but I don't need to get into the whole uncanny valley thing. Most of you watching this know more about that than I do. But basically, of all the things you might see in a science fiction movie, spaceships, aliens, alien planets, the only thing that you have in your head as a comparison are the human faces. Everything else is unknown to you, so you have no way of judging whether or not it's real looking, fake looking, or whatever the case may be. And that's why humans are so much trouble. That's why getting humans right are so much trouble. Now, there was a workaround that I'm going to show you. I don't even know if workaround is the right term. It's a technology pipeline, and it's working, and I know we can do it. So I'll show you that too. But first of all, I just pulled two clips to show you guys today. There is Marisha points out that they went stylized for Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi on the Star Wars thing because they had to go stylized because they couldn't get the humans to look good enough. I hate stylized. I'm not saying there's not good. I'm not saying there's nothing to it. I'm just saying it's not my cup of tea. I have no interest in doing cartoons. I have no interest in it at all. Zero. The only reason I got involved with Unreal Engine was when it started to look like it was within reach of being believable as real. That's otherwise I simply have ignored the whole thing for 3 decades now. So to me, photorealism is the key, and photorealism is a term that's been bashed to hell. Anytime anybody puts out something that says, oh, it's really pretty good, it's not bad looking. Photorealistic, no, it's not. By the way, as an example of this kind of thing, I mentioned that DCS has some shots, exterior shots, at Digital Combat Simulator. Some of the jets in the exteriors are so good that I can't tell them apart from real. But when I look at the ground, I can tell that's not real in DCS as it exists today. And certainly when I'm in the cockpit, they put all the digital scratches on things and the textures and all the rest of it. And I'm tempted to sit around and look at this cockpit and go, oh my God, that looks exactly like real life. But then I think about what it does look like in real life, and I say, no, it doesn't look like that. It's not good enough. And so how do we make it good enough? Well, we've talked about this before, but there's a couple of updates. The people that put out MetaHumans, which is the Unreal Engine 5 best case CG characters, which came out a little over a year ago, those have been out for a year or two, and the studio that put them out has made a significant improvement. Good Lord, Clay, is everybody your birthday? I'm happy to do it. Just real quick, I have a super chat from Clay Bradley, our friend Clay. It's my friend Terry's birthday. Can she get a shout out? Happy birthday to you, Terry. Happy birthday to you, Terry. Everybody sing along. Happy birthday, dear Terry. Happy birthday to you, and many more. Always happy to do that kind of thing. Hi, Terry. Happy birthday, and I on behalf of everybody, I'd like to apologize for the fact that you know Clay so well. All right, so here's our two issues, right? In order to achieve this level of realism, we can go about this two ways. We can either let the CG characters get good enough to be believable, and the metahumans are the best that they've got for Unreal. And Unity had a tech demo out 6 months ago that looked awfully good. Or we can use another method. And the other method, since I don't want to do live action combined with CG, the other method is to use deepfake. So let me show you the breakthrough announcement that they've made just a few days ago, and I'll tell you why this is important. The people that did MetaHuman a couple years ago, year and a half ago, have released a demo video that's about 5-6 days old now for a new piece of software module that they're calling MetaHuman Animator. And this may not seem very different, but it is. In order to explain the power of this, let me just tell you what our workflow has been for, for DS for Dungeon and all the rest of it. Actually, give me 1 second. Let's see if I can. It's not on this drive, I'm sure. All right. So what we do for DS for Dungeon and all the work that we've done so far, and some of the stuff I've done, I've been pretty happy with MetaHuman. It works like this. Put an iPhone there. It has to be an iPhone 10 or later, because the iPhone 10 has a series of infrared cameras that are mapping your face. The reason the iPhone is critical is because the iPhone has facial recognition technology. And they had to be very careful about that because you couldn't unlock somebody's phone by holding up a photo of that person, right? That facial recognition technology to unlock your phone has to be pretty good in 3D. And as it turns out that the iPhone is taking enough information in through that facial recognition technology to produce a pretty good facial capture output. So there's a number of solutions that take the iPhone, run the data out in real time, run it into Unreal Engine. The phone is looking at your facial features. It's mapping the changes, sending it to Unreal. Unreal's applying it to a rig, and it's making your Unreal character do facial expressions. And I've gotten pretty good at that. In fact, I've seen a number. You're welcome, Clay, and happy birthday again, Terry. I've seen a number of like award-winning videos out there that are Unreal Engine videos that I didn't think were nearly as good as DS for Dungeon. And the reason that it didn't look as good is because when most animators, at least amateur animators, do a motion capture, I'll give you an example. If I'm reading a line, I'll be saying something like, so there it is, there's the castle. Finally, we see the castle that we've come to look at. Look how awful and dark that castle looks. Boy, it is a dark-looking castle. So that's what they do. And the eyes are essentially immobile, and it doesn't look right. So what I did, since I had the faces covered by helmets, I was determined to act this thing out with the eyes. So if Zoe's character's standing over to the right, what I did when I did DS for Dungeon and other works is I did this. Wow, look at that castle, huh? I've never seen a castle like that. That thing is just, I mean, look at it from top to bottom. So I got my eyes moving all the time, and the eyes look fantastic. So having those eyes in motion goes a long way to get you out of the uncanny valley, because the eye tracking is excellent, and human eyes are the key to the whole thing. So our procedure, our workflow would be this. I would set up the iPhone, and I would hook it up to Unreal Engine. Now I'm looking into the iPhone camera, and off on the screen, I can see the character that looks as much like me as I could get him. I just play around with it in, Character Creator, and just kind of, move the eyes together and, make it as much like me as I could. And then I would basically perform the thing into the iPhone. And then it would apply that to the metahuman character. And that's how we've been doing everything. It's done in real time. So Zoe, who did an amazing job on the voiceover, didn't do any motion capture. In DS for Dungeon, I animated my character's facial movements and his as well. And that's a problem, because if I wanted to get Zoe into it, then I would have to bring him in here. What this new MetaHuman animator does is it works off of the video, which means that I can send Zoe an iPhone 10. He can record into the phone and then just send me the video file. The video file? Maybe. I think so. Not 100% sure about that, but I think so. Actually, I have to think about that. In any event, what this new thing does is it doesn't just take the flat look of your eyes and map that onto an existing rig. It creates a three-dimensional picture. It imports that picture into Unreal, and then it creates a unique facial rate for your face. And as a matter of fact, as you'll see in this demo, it will create a photorealistic, let me correct that, it will create an accurate representation of the person's face as you speak into it. So instead of me having to go into MetaHuman and try to make a head that's as much like mine as possible, this thing will just analyze the head and will generate a 3D face that's very, very close to mine. But then it does something really interesting, and that is it's analyzing this four-dimensional picture rather than this two-dimensional image of the eyes, and it makes a much more accurate capture of the emotions. Now, this demo that came out was not too long. It was about 5 minutes. I tried to cut as much fat out of it. This is about 2 minutes here. Yes, Unreal Engine. So first thing I want to show you is this. This is the tech demo that was released about a week ago or less, showing this new procedure. And it begins by having an actor on stage. She's just looking into an iPhone. It's just a simple iPhone. There's a couple lights on the side. And then you'll see it take that iPhone data, create a constant 3D animation thing, create its own facial structure, put the rig on it, and then play it back. And then we'll talk about the 80-20 rule. So first thing to see here is this new thing. It's actually pretty impressive, but it's not perfect. So here's the first one. Ready? Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, and action.
I need performance capture to work like a mirror. I need it to capture whether I'm acting scared or angry. And sometimes all I need is a look.
Cut. Thanks, Mel. That was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
MetaHuman Animator uses video and depth data to convert this data into high-fidelity performance animation, and it can even use audio to produce convincing tongue animation. So from now on, it's just a single button click to kick off the processing, which for a performance of this length will take less than a minute to convert into animation. So Mel, while that is processing, let me show you something else.
Yeah. Oh, is that me?
Yeah, this is what we refer to as your MetaHuman DNA.
Cool. And this is generated by the capture we made earlier, right?
Yeah, that's right. So from only 3 frames of video and depth data, we can generate a rig that predicts all of your facial expressions in just a couple of minutes.
Wow. And do you only need to do this once for each actor?
Yes, that's right. It calibrates the solver to your face so that we can produce the performance in a way that faithfully reproduces your original performance.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. We can interactively look at the animation while it's being solved and compare it to your original performance. So it looks like it's almost finished. After this, it's going to do one more pass to make the curves more stable.
I need performance capture to work like a mirror. I need it to capture whether I'm acting scared or angry. And sometimes, all I need is a look.
And all of this is solved directly onto animator-friendly controls. In this case, we are using a bespoke 4D rig, which we created together with Ninja Theory for Hellblade 2, but it's also ready to use on any MetaHuman or any other rig that follows our new MetaHuman standard. These technologies are completely redefining our creative process, as they will redefine yours when we release MetaHuman Animator to everyone in just a couple of months.
Okay, so that wasn't bad. Now we get to the 60-80 rule, the 20-80 rule. Motion capture, facial motion capture like that will get you 80% of the way. But to get it really convincing, you need to go in by hand and tweak all of this stuff. The thing that's interesting about this is that the rig is generated and you also get the video frame. So on a frame-by-frame basis, I can look at the video of me doing the recording, or of the woman in this case, right? She's doing the recording, and I look at my animation frame by frame, and I realize, you know, the motion capture didn't quite capture enough of the eyebrow raise, so I can just go in and manually raise the eyebrows on that. And when you get that final 20% on there, you get actually pretty close. So this tool will be available in a couple of months, and it will make the job of getting the MetaHuman in Unreal Engine much closer to what we want than we could do before with the earlier editions of it. But that's not the powerful breakthrough technology. Here's the breakthrough technology. I've shown versions of this before, but this is what I think we have to do, and I'll tell you what I think the potential problem of this is. This is, as I said, something we've talked about before, but this is taking what you just saw. It's taking the MetaHuman, it's taking the computer-animated CG character that comes with Unreal, and it's using deepfake technology on top of that. Now, traditionally, if you've seen any of these Tom Cruise deepfakes, there's a guy who's a Tom Cruise impersonator who gets the expressions and the voices exactly right. And then he deepfakes Tom Cruise's actual face on him, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to show you with this is the difference between a MetaHuman and a deep-faked MetaHuman. So I'll try and talk through this as we go here. Here we go. Hopefully this will work. Okay, so the guy basically got as close as he could get to Tom Cruise's face in the MetaHuman creator, right? So that's pretty close. Looks quite a bit like Tom Cruise. There it is unanimated, right? Okay, not bad. Now, that's a MetaHuman character, and what does that MetaHuman character look like? That's the MetaHuman character, right? It's close, but it's not. I don't believe it. But now, let's put a deep fake of Tom Cruise on top of this animated character. Now that, I believe. And it will respond to all the lighting changes. If you change the lighting on the MetaHuman model, the deepfake will automatically compensate for shadow, lighting, color, and all the rest of it. I can live with a character like that. I think that character looks completely believable. Now they've done a split screen. On the left is the MetaHuman character. On the right is the MetaHuman with the deepfake applied over the top of it. And there's a night and day difference. I wish he was lit a little more evenly so you could really tell. But just look at the eyes. Eyes on the right-hand part of the screen are Tom Cruise's eyes. They're moving according to the metahuman character. That's the end of that clip, so we just stop that again here. Goodbye to you. And so this is the way that I've been wanting to go. I wanted to do metahuman characters, get them as close looking as they could to the actual actors, map the hell out of the actors' faces so that the deepfake uses a series of still pictures. In this case of Tom Cruise, is taking a look at all kinds of different photos of Tom Cruise, film clips of Tom Cruise. What the AI does is, in this case, is it looks at the expression on the metahuman and then matches the photographic picture of Tom Cruise that's closest to that, including the eyes, the mouth, does it all separately, lights it the same way, sticks it on, and we're good to go. Now, I only have one problem with this, and I don't know if it's a solvable problem. I haven't had a chance to dig into it, what with the work I've been doing, but that's done, so we're back on the colonies again. And here's where the only problem is, because if there wasn't for this problem, we'd be home free. My understanding is that what deepfake is doing is it is essentially gluing a video layer on top of the metahuman layer. So every single frame of the character's face in metahuman, deepfake is generating a frame of Tom Cruise and it's gluing it on top of that. And when all of these things run together, you've got Tom Cruise's face. It's perfect. Great. But, and this is the only but, what happens if the metahuman character is either inside a helmet or behind a piece of plexiglass, like he's inside a rover? If I'm looking at a character in a spacesuit, I've got a metahuman in a spacesuit. I've got great spacesuits. I've got great looking metahumans. I can get the metahuman to work inside the helmet because Unreal Engine is doing all of that stuff. It's applying the reflections and all the rest of the helmet stuff on top of the thing, rendering that. But I think that what the deepfake is doing is it's gluing the face on top of that, and I don't know if it can do that and still maintain the glass. And that's a real problem, because if it doesn't do that, then I've got a different issue. I've got to figure out a way to do that. Now, there is one other thing, and that is that that the metahuman characters are using generic skin. And so one way to increase the quality without deepfake is to use photo-scanned people. Let me show you the difference between that and a metahuman. Hang on a second. Just take me a second to get this. I'll show you the difference here. Give me a second. Couldn't find it because I was searching for Ed people. Let's try 3D people. Is it 1024? I always get that wrong. Okay, so I want to show you just a still of what a 3D scanned head looks like. Because when you scan the head 3D, you not only get the topography right, you also get the skin textures. It's pulling the skin textures off of the photograph. So give me 1 second. I know exactly what I'm looking for here. I just got to find it. Head scans. Yep. I'm just going to grab a still here. I've got one character from these guys that I used before that I thought was really good. Now, there's this one company that produces all of these. They got probably 60 or 70 head scanned humans, and the quality is great. Unfortunately, the company is in the Netherlands, and so the models, the people that come in to get their head scanned, are some of the weirdest looking people I've ever seen. They all look like birds. They're just very strange looking people. So I'll take the one I like the most, the least strange looking individual. Let me just find him here, because we're not really worried about the individual so much as we're looking at the example. Yeah, this is the guy who I think is best. And this is only like $70 for this head. I'll find an example. Yeah, I'll just take this one. Okay, so here's an example of a scanned head. I'm going to have to rescale this, no doubt. Hang on. You bastard, come here. Why don't you? Yeah, you are a rotten son of a gun, aren't you? All right, to hell with it. I can't move it. I don't know why. It's just not grabbing it. But anyway, I really want to get this right. What if I do this? It's not. It's just not doing it. Okay, so that's a scanned head, and it looks better than the metahumans do. Let me try one more thing. Hang on 1 second. 1 second, because it's worth looking at. Cancel you. And trash you. Now do you let me it's just too big. All right, anyway, you get the idea. So you can get closer that way, and that's what I'm going to be experimenting with next. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this head and I'm going to have it sent in and have it rigged for the iPhone animation, which is what I've been using before. There's another issue that we can improve on, and that is that the iPhone animation, which is what I've been using exclusively, generates 52 different morph targets. So when I use the iPhone to animate, it's using a model that has 52 standard expressions, right? All of this stuff, all of the, there's 52 of those morph targets. Some rigs will go to 244 morph targets, and the more different targets you get, the more subtle the improvement is. Oh, wow, Marisha's got something to say here. Hang on a second, it's interesting. I want to say that deepfake uses triplanar shading, which uses projection onto the mesh. Any accessories would have to be separate models without transparent material for it to pass through. Yes, so I can't do the helmets, which is what I thought. So next thing to do is to take this this character, or somebody like this character, and I'm just going to rescale this guy. That's what I'm going to do. Just take me a second, just so you can see it up close. Because when you see the detail on this, image size, here we go. Yep. Hang on. Hang on. I hate this dead air, and I apologize for it. Let's see if this will work. Come on, Billy. You can do it. You can do it, Bill. Got confidence in you, Bill. Here we go. All right, let's try this. Hey, there you go. So you can see that the detail on this guy actually looks really pretty good. And this one might be behaving. No, it's still not great. I don't know what the hell the problem is. Hey, hold on. Anyway, that is a considerably better looking quality than the metahuman thing, because it is using the guy's actual skin texture as he was sitting in there. So that gives us some wiggle room. So as far as the colonies go, my next set of tests are going to be to take one of these characters that I think are of higher quality than the metahumans. I'm going to have the 52 morph shades blended onto them. I'm going to animate that guy, and I'm going to see how realistic I can get him to look. I have used that model in some of my tests for the colonies from a couple years ago, but it wasn't animated. So while he looked good, he looked a little dead. I'm going to put him into some different lighting situations and see how he looks. If it turns out that this is close enough, then I don't need to deep fake it, and that saves a ton of time and effort, a ton. And it also solves the problem, because that 3D head that you just saw, this guy, does not have, there's no deep fake glued onto the top of it. That's the model. That's the model at work. So If I take that model and it looks this good in Unreal and I animate it, then he can be inside a helmet. He can be inside a helmet, inside a cockpit. He can do all kinds of things. So that's what's actually next for us on the colonies test project, is seeing if we can get the realism level on the humans that we want inside of Unreal without the deep fake. And this would be the next step. So that's what I plan to do, and I hope to have that by next Monday to show you guys whether that's working or not. I feel actually pretty good about it. So what we would do in that case then would be, with a budget, is we would, I almost said cast live actors, but that's not really what we need. We would cast models, real people. They don't have to be actors. They just people who look like what we want the character to look like. This is expensive. We would cast those people. We would then take those people down to a 3D scanning facility. They would do a super high resolution scan of their face, and that would get you not only the topography to match the actor's face perfectly, but all of the skin details as well would come on. Now, you would have to do that on high level for your hero characters, but you could probably get by with, you'd have to do a fair amount of it. Nice thing about that is you get, you can get the face you want, and then you get an actor whose voice you want. You don't have to put these two things together. And I haven't spoken to my friend Maurice LaMarche in, God, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. But Maurice did, he did Kip on Futurama. He did Morgo. He does I've forgotten the name. It's been so long. He does a fantastic William Shatner. So then you can hire voice actors. They can do 2 or 3 voices, save a little bit of money that way. But that's the plan. The next step on the colonies also is to pull together enough of the assets to start creating one of these 5 demo scenes. I'll start with the simplest one, obviously. Hang on a second, just flew right out of my head. Things that were very difficult on the most difficult part of Dias for Dungeon is using stock motion animations and then gluing those things together and morphing them. So if I've got a scene where Zoe raises his sword and then his shield and he turns around and then he runs, I got to get a sword raise animation, shield raise animation, turn animation, a run animation, splice those all things together. Sitting back here, which has not been used for months now, almost 6 months, a year. So the nice thing about that is if I've got a guy just driving a rover, right? I just get in the suit and I put the head thing on here and I just do this. I look around, all the hand motions. You should be able to just drop those things in. Let's turn on the auxiliary heating, that kind of thing. So that will be the next step on getting the demo ready for the colonies. And that is, I have a high degree of confidence in everything except for the human aspect of it. And that's got to work. The very, very first metahuman test I ever did, I thought was the most realistic. I know this is obnoxious. I think it was the most realistic metahuman thing I've ever seen, done by anybody, because I did a lot of the facial action here. I'm going to go to the trouble of finding that, just because I like it so much, and I want to show it to you again to show you what acting out through the character can do as opposed to, just reading a line. So once again, give me another second. Come on. I'm just going to have to dig it up, and we're just going to have to hang on there for a second. YouTube. And switch channels. Yep. Almost there, kids. Everybody be cool. Talk amongst yourselves. Working on it. I hate the dead air. I hate it so much. YouTube Studio. Now, There we go, finally. So this thing I'm going to show you is it is the very, very first thing I ever did with MetaHumans. I did it so early that I didn't have any idea of how to animate the suits. I didn't move the heads, nothing. It's the first thing I ever touched in MetaHumans. And I still think it's not only one of the best things I ever did, it's one of the best things I've seen in it. So you can take a look at this as 2-year-old state of the art for old Billy Boy here. Yeah, I love this. Now, I should warn you, I did this off the top of my head, and so there is an F-bomb in this, just because it seemed appropriate. I was just basically ad-libbing the dialogue, and so if that's something that bothers you, and I know it does bother some people, my apologies. But I'm going to show it to you anyway, so I'm not proud of that. I was just trying to come up with some dialogue. So what you're about to see is the first MetaHuman test I did. The suits are great, but the suits are not in motion. The heads are not in motion. I recorded me. I'm doing all the talking. So it's not, the character's not looking like me though. It's not supposed to look like me. It's just somebody else. So I'm doing the voice and the face acting for myself, and then I got the character who looks a lot like Zoe, and he's in the reversals. He doesn't say a word. I'm also acting the reversals as well. So it's my face doing both sets of these things, and this is the result. So I think it's actually pretty good. So let me cut the microphone this time, and we'll drop it in, and I can listen to it. And you can tell me what you think. So just hang on one second.
Hey man, you don't have to like it. I don't like it either. But you know, look around you, man. There's nothing here. There's nothing here, and there's nobody coming. We are going to have to make it here on our own, or else we're both going to die out here. And that's all there is to it. Now, I don't like it, and you don't like it, but that doesn't make any difference. If we don't start working together, then neither one of us are going to get off this fucking rock ever.
I'm so tired of this, honestly. Okay, we're back. I saw a comment here saying the head needs to move with the suits and stuff. Yes, it does. I just didn't know how to do it yet. Eric says big issue is the lack of hair. Yes, they're bald because I was just getting started with it. The nice thing about the suit stuff is you usually get the guys in the Snoopy caps. So that covers a lot of it. We should be back now, right? Audio's back. Yeah. One day I'll get a producer. So that's the next step for me. The next step is to get a photo scanned head, my voice, in a suit, walking on, let's say, the moon. Moon's as good as anything else. Easy to get a hold of and easy to do. So with that done, we will reach the next thing. Monk in Training says, you made that? Not bad. I think the music is wrong. Well, thank you. I grabbed the first music I could find too. But in any event, that's what I'm going to be doing next, and I hope to have that by next week. Now, on to the next topic, which is related to all of this stuff. It's certainly related to the technology, but we're off the colonies now, so we'll just kind of jump off the colonies, and we'll and jump onto something else. So I was looking at the comments for the public Apollo 11 thing, and they've been just great. And I keep coming back to an idea. Again, we're off the colonies now. I'm trying to figure out what to do with new content because we need to do a new membership drive. We've lost almost pretty nearly half the members that we had right after the election in 2020. Now, a bunch of those people fell off within a month or two after they realized I couldn't overturn the results of the election, and I don't know if I promised to do that. It wouldn't surprise me if I did. I was pretty far out of it. But nevertheless, we got to do something new. I've talked about doing this don't be an idiot thing, but it's occurred to me several times that that's not really political. That's educational, which is to some degree political. But I need a new method for these political commentaries. And I know everybody wants to see the firewalls, and they're easy for me to do. They're getting down to 12,000 views now. And part of that is the suppression algorithm and all the rest of it. And part of it is also the fact that looking at what's actually working out there, virtually everything that's working out there is got some kind of a visual gimmick. Now, you may not like the word gimmick. Not bad for a boomer, says Monk in Training. Thank you. I started computer animation as a boomer. I started with a series of impressions on soft clay using a stylus, and I baked those, and I kind of ran them, flipped them real fast so that you could kind of see a bit of an animation thing, and I've kind of been improving from them. I don't want to do reaction videos. I want to do political commentary. So I want to come back to something I've talked about before because it won't leave me alone. I had a couple of refinements on this idea, and I just thought I'd get some feedback on this live, so this is always nice. I have talked about doing I'm talking about political content now. I've talked about doing political content that I'm temporarily calling The Last Man on the Moon. And the idea, there's a lot of ways to frame this thing, but here's basically how it would work. It would be completely CG, and it would be a guy who's stuck in a small habitat, who's got no other form of entertainment other than to watch the news feed coming from the Earth. In this regard, it's quite a bit like Mystery Science Theater 3000, right? Got nothing else to watch up there. And so there's a couple ways to do this. One way to do it would be to use an Apollo suit. They've got some excellent Apollo suit models. I could just basically... So here's one pitch, right? One pitch is I'm talking about lore now. I'm talking about theory crafting the background for this thing. There's a number of ways to do it. Here's one way. One way to do it is to say that we secretly put a base on the moon, and that the unmanned Apollo Saturn V launches that were used to test the Saturn V for real, right? Like Apollo 4, for example. Saturn V test, went into orbit, everything worked great, fine, no people on board, right? One way to do it would be to say that those unmanned Apollo Saturn V tests were actually used to deliver payloads to the moon, right? Obviously, this is all fictional. I'm just trying to find something that's got a decent kind of a cover on it. And then using the Air Force's Dinosaur project, which was the space plane that the Air Force developed, we actually put a man on the moon in secret, right at the same time of the Apollo program, maybe a little bit earlier, something like that, right? And for some reason or another, he got stuck up there. He's got a nuclear-powered habitat. He's got the ability to regenerate oxygen. He can grow food. All of the stuff there is there. It was an experimental base that was done in the 60s in order to test this stuff. And there's still a guy on the moon who is watching these transmissions from Earth in 2023. And the reason I like this is because it allows me to bring that Apollo era space age commentary to the current political catastrophe. So you got a steely-eyed missile man up there who's close friends with Neil Armstrong, and he's up on the moon, and he's watching maybe at the South Pole of the moon, something cool like that, right? Someplace where it's not easy to discover. And he's got water there, and he's got the things he needs, and he's got a friend, maybe he doesn't, I don't know, but he's just sitting there, and he's waiting for Elon Musk to come and get him off the moon, and he has got nothing to do but he's seen every video that he took with him at the time because it's on videotaped and everything, right? And he's just got nothing to do but watch the news feeds coming from Earth and commenting on it. Now, what I like about this particular gimmick is because Bob Knife's kind of on close to what I'm sort of talking about. Just how about if Bill Skid was talking commentary while cruising in an F-100? Just spitballing here. Spitballing is what we need to do. So one possibility is that I'm this guy on the moon and I'm watching all this other stuff. Then I added a refinement to this, and I probably won't be able to do that because of copyright issues, although I'm not 100% sure about that. Second idea I had was, what if my character's name was Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Mason? Now, boomers will get that right away. But if I was Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Mason, promoted after the landing from Major Matthew Mason, then all of the Major Matt Mason toys that I grew up with would be simplified versions of the gear that I actually have up there. In other words, the Major Matt Mason Space Station toy would be a very, very simple version of what the habitat actually looked like. Now, I'm throwing that in there for the sheer nostalgia power of it. And there's something about that I like a lot. For those of you not familiar with it, Major Matt Mason was Mattel's Man in Space, and it was a space toy. It was super popular. I grew up with it. A lot of us did. Let me see if I can find a quick trailer for it. Hang on a second. And so there's something appealing about it being Major Matt Mason on the moon, talking about this stuff. See the space station model, and these are all. I want the, yeah. This is the first Major Matt Mason toy I bought. I'll just drop this in real quick. Give me a second. And so we would have a version of this toy, but it'd be a much more sophisticated version. It's like they're taking the actual hardware as a sort of an homage to the guy who was lost and still stuck up there, and they're just kind of, you'll get the idea where I'm going. Here we go. Here's the Major Matt Mason thing. This is the space crawler, I think it was called. You'd think I'd know that by now. Hang on a second. But there's something really kind of cool about this idea that I like a lot. Of course, Major Matt Mason was copyrighted, but I don't know if Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Mason is. Here it comes. Give me a second. And this will probably be too small to fit, but you get the idea. All right, so this is Major Matt Mason, Mattel's Man in Space. I lived and died this stuff. This is him with one of the many toys that I had. And here it comes. Idea of for nostalgia's sake. So here's the end result that I'm looking for. I want to be able to do commentary on today's political situation, and I want to do it from the perspective of a guy who was in the Apollo program. That's when I watched the Apollo 11 thing. I just really, when I rewatched it, it just really hit me hard. that I got the inspiration for this Last Man on the Moon's been floating around in my head for almost a year now. But watching, since Daily Wire reloaded the first of the Apollo 11 series, I've been watching that first episode, and after all of the time I've spent doing the Cold War and the Empire of Terror, I look back on how that was written, the Apollo series, how it was written, and I just love it. I love the style of it. I love kind of there's a little bit of cheekiness in it, but it's real optimistic. It's really kind of cool. You know, how do we get to the moon? Oh, cap gun, Scooter. That aspect of it I really like. And so what I'm toying with is the idea of taking the guy who's the host of the Apollo 11, what we saw, putting him on the moon, and having him do his thing. Now, one option just occurred to me just now is that the set for Apollo 11, what we saw thing, I always envisioned it as an underground bunker. It's a backup mission command, backup mission control. So it's possible that the thing's buried in a mountain and the guy got stuck down there, couldn't get out, but I think it's probably better. Monk in Training says, in my humble opinion, political commentary is dead. Daily Wire may be bigger, but I'm only subscribed to them for the cultural stuff. Politics ruined everything, Semper Fi. Yes, but that's what people are here for. And I like the idea of here's the image I'm going for. I like the idea of a guy in a spacesuit sitting on a lounge chair with his feet up. He's got a can of Pabst Blue Ribbon in his hand, or a tube of it or whatever, and he's just sitting there killing time, watching the Earth, and just listening to this stuff and all the rest of it. So they're just, I'm looking at what's working out there, and what's working is gimmicks. Doomcock's a gimmick. Awaken with JT's a gimmick. Even Crowder is essentially a gimmick, right? He's playing a character. He's not really. We know what we're talking about here. So number one, I like it because I like the picture frame of, okay, if there was ever a time where we were serious about things, to me it was the 1960s, and I don't mean the hippie 60s. I mean the skinny tie, pocket protector. Let's do the math for going to the moon on a slide rule. 60s. That's 60s. And I like the idea that this guy has not been on Earth for the intervening 50 years. Now, a lot of this that I'm talking about now is just coming out of my head as I'm thinking about it. It's usually what happens, why I like to talk about these things. So since if you took Neil Armstrong was too much class really to ever really talk about this. Let's say you took an Apollo astronaut, and instead of him having to spend the last 50 years on Earth, so that he got that slow boiling frog sense of it didn't just all happen at once. What if he had been taken off of the Earth? Time goes by and he's dropped back into 2023. What would the 1960s steely-eyed missile man attitude about all of this garbage that's going on right now be? And if I could set up a picture frame around that, that would give me the ability to make commentary about it that would instantly cut to the perspective that I'm looking for. Because most of us out here are wondering what the hell's happening. You know, we knew what's going on. We know the world isn't supposed to like this. But we don't get it. That's an interesting point. Air Techie says it's kind of like a serious Austin Powers. Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Now, it's true he'd be 90 years or 100 years old. First of all, I can make the character older, but secondly, I could also talk about, a hibernation booth, or he's in some kind of, he wakes up every, 3 weeks or something because he has a limited amount of food supplies. We can back that story up. Or he was put into the capsule in suspended animation and he just woke up, that kind of thing. So there's 100 ways we can get around that. Oh man, Sad Wings Raging has just just wins the internet for the night. What the guy would do is, according to him, is I would wake up and declare exterminatus for Earth. That's a 40K term for when things are really bad on a planet, then it's time for exterminatus. We're not going to dick around anymore. Emperor's just going to send a legion out there, and they're just going to sterilize the planet, kill everything. So there's that. Now here's another way to do this. And the only reason I'm a little reluctant to do this one is because I don't want it to get confused with the colonies. But this is a potential too. Reason I said I don't want to get it confused with the colonies is because there's no faster than light travel in the colonies. Let me rephrase that. There's no one way faster than light travel. Once you get a Stargate up on both ends, then you can go from one point to another. But anyway, you have to go out there slower than light than build it. But one possibility would be to have a guy who's on a planet and they got there using faster than light travel, and he's at a listening post on a planet that's 60 light years away from the Earth. And so what he's seeing is he's got incredibly huge sensor base. There's some amazing models of these kind of radar installations. So basically this guy's kind of a caretaker, like at the Overlook Hotel or something. He's got this incredible listening station. His supply never came. His resupply never came. He's stuck there. So he's turned the thing to Earth, and he's picking up signals as they come to him, but he's 60 light years away. You have to have faster than light travel because he has to outrun the radio waves. I don't know. I just somehow don't think that's quite as cool. And one thing about the Major Matt Mason thing too is I could have a character that looks kind of like Major Matt Mason, Bill, Twitch makes it impossible for me to even sign into my account. I am Tom Bombadil, and I cannot log into Twitch. Tom Bombadil, I don't know what to tell you about that. I just don't know. I think I like the Matt Mason thing better, too. I really do. So I think, yeah, but I'm talking about I like the moon idea better, too, because I don't want these things to be confused. And, yeah, Eric Blake says, Rip Van Winkle in space, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's actually a good term, right? Because those of you familiar with the story, which was part of my growing up, it's a very old story. I think it's a Dutch story. There's a guy who goes up into the mountains. He's a young man, and he hears the sound of like laughter, and he finds a little glen, and there are like gnomes. And they're playing like skittles and things like that. And so they offer him some kind of a wine or mead or something like that. So he takes a drink, lies down under this tree, goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, he's 50 years older. He's got a long white beard and everything. Then he comes back down, and everybody he knows is gone. So there's another cool thing about doing it as a moon mission, and that is you get to use kind of retro technology. For instance, the TV camera would be black and white, and you get the scan lines. You get Biden up there on a black and white TV with the scan lines. Now you're starting to get into kind of cool territory. And I don't know. I just think there's something to this. And so I guess the only way to really do that is to do a test. The simplest test should be the easiest one, to just proof of concept test. And that might be just to obviously the simplest thing would be the guy in a suit looking up at the moon, but up at the Earth, you'd need a way for him to see something to comment on. So it'd have to have the inside of a habitat built, something small. It's got to be desperate, by the way. This guy's got to be really desperate. And maybe just a little bit mad. CP Tome says a deep fake Janice Rand. That's an interesting idea right there. I do not want to confuse it with the colonies. I don't want to make it part of the colonies. On the contrary, I want to separate it as much as possible. So that's a thought. And that's something else I can do. And furthermore, it's something I can do alongside of the other thing I said I need to do, which is to get as realistic a face as possible. So I can kill two birds with one stone there. I can get one of those scan faces, get the morph targets for it, pull it into Unreal, do a test on the political commentary, and that would give me a realism test on the suit and also give me a realism test from in terms of the political commentary. Kent Niebergall in YouTube says it could be even a guy on a Pacific island with access to radio or TV. Yeah, that's kind of Gilligan's Island answer, right? And then in the Twitch stream, Japan0499 says, NASA, what's going on, sir? And the line will be, you're not authorized to use this channel, and it's ma'am. So does he stop talking with Earth because he can't talk with Earth any longer? Or does he stop talking with Mission Control because it's just too heartbreaking? Maybe he'd be just talking to other 60s steely-eyed missile men using shortwave or something. Now, Marusha, of course, brings a question up that has to be answered, and that is, well, Mitch had a good point. She said, who's the target audience? Well, the target audience would be, number one, trying to get new people into it, but also I got to do something to get new members in here, and I feel like I need something different. I can more or less maintain what I've got by doing, regular firewalls. It's just that nobody's watching them anymore. And I don't know how many more things I can talk about that I haven't already talked about with those things. I mean, the memorable firewalls are the ones that are really well researched, and there's a timelessness to them, right? Like number one with the bullet, that business about, let's look at gun violence. Let's see which places violent and which places aren't. Those are great, and I can still do those. But there comes a point when you have to open it up enough so that you can get kind of new people in there. Netflix show character lived off the moon alone and had a lawn chair, more or less. There was a Sam Rockwell movie called Moon, which was kind of like this. Holy cow, what is that from? Is that from that, what was that series they did with the alternate history? We came in for all mankind. What's it called? I don't remember. I didn't particularly like it very much. For all mankind. Thank you. There was a Twilight Zone. I'm just spitballing here. There's a Twilight Zone episode where there was an astronaut. He was stuck on this. They called it an asteroid, but it was, had a full atmosphere and stuff. He was stuck on this far, far remote place, and they had given him a robot woman companion. I don't remember the details of it, but he starts out interacting with the thing and it acts like a toaster. But over time, he gets to fall in love with this creature. And then I think they're ready to take him back or something. And he has to leave this robot companion on the moon. And he doesn't want to. And so there might be something there too, Chris O'Neill, bringing us back to Earth, says there was just a major chemical spill into the primary water supply for the city of Philadelphia. Wasn't that a coincidence? I'm sure there's a lot of that stuff going around. There is no Twilight Zone. There's only the Twilight Zone. Is that it, Dave? My name is Alicia. What's yours? It was Jack Warden, wasn't it? Yeah. So that would be something else to do too, kind of have a all of this is so speculative. I'm having a hard time really kind of answering it, but it is interesting if you had, first of all, be visually cool to have like a Janice Rand kind of a space companion, let's just say. Especially if she were wired to be programmed like a 60s housewife. Then you get into interesting things too, like the robotic companion could say, just because I declare I'm a woman doesn't mean I'm a woman. I'm a machine. I'm a what's the word I'm looking for? I'm an approximation. I'm a creation. You can't just wish yourself into something like that. So Marusha says, I thought the point was to reach younger generations who weren't already into conservatism. Seems more like it captures the older gen's nostalgia. Well, it does capture the older generation's nostalgia, and older generations where most of our membership money comes from. That's my primary concern right now. But there's a lot of Gen Zers out there who know that they're missing something and are looking for it. And I think that's who the target audience would be. I have to continue to do stuff that the members understand to be worthwhile. What I really need to do is get some memberships in, help us kind of move this thing along here. Yeah, Japan 499 says, I'm sorry if I had Janice Rand around, I don't think I'd be commenting about news. No, I agree, although there's 24 hours in a day. I think I'm probably just going to have to go along with this just to get it out of my system to see whether it works or not. There's one other thing that you get out of this, and that is if you are doing this as an animated thing, you get a level of protection, a level of protection from censorship. South Park, for example, and Family Guy to a lesser extent, but South Park gets to talk about things in a way that no one else talks about them because it's an animated show. You could never have Trey and Matt on there saying the things that Cartman says. It just wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't be allowed to happen. So that gives you a, it gives you something. And it also gives you kind of a real sort of, Marusha mentioned nostalgia, but there's also kind of a sadness, a sadness, and at the same time, a kind of hope. I think that's probably the angle I'm really looking for. Just terribly sad watching what's going on up there, and then also the sense that, look, we did this in 1967. What's the matter? What's the matter up there? Huh? What's wrong? You can do all of this stuff. I can just start handing out solutions, water levels in California. Build some desalination plants. We had the Model 19 available. It was working in Jackass Flats, Nevada. We had this thing going in 1966. What's the matter with you people? That's kind of the angle I'm going for, because all of the problems that we have are self-inflicted problems. They're just, I think more than anything, that's probably what I'd like to communicate to a new audience, is that this is not difficult. It's not difficult. There's nothing to it. You could solve to whatever degree the global warming issue, man-made global warming issue, is real or not. There have been a number of different engineering solutions. One of them is to put particulate dust in the air, or build, mirrors, and these mirrors have to be something like, I want to say 200 kilometers across, or some things like that. I don't know. But just as one example, ironic example, if you really wanted to cool the Earth down, you could reroute the airplane flights that are supposedly putting out all this carbon. you could route them specifically to be in the contrails, right? Everybody's talking about, oh, look, it's chemtrails. It's not chemtrails. It's ice particles coming from high bypass engines that are much, much larger in volume and much more persistent. And I'm not going to get into that. You believe they're chemtrails, you're welcome to believe it. But I know what it is. But one of the things you could do is you could just reroute air traffic to fly in the contrails. Find the altitude where the contrails are going and do that. What you would end up doing is you would end up putting a lot more clouds in the sky. And the nice thing about this, the essential thing about this is you would mechanically cool the Earth, which is a much better way to do it. Put a shade out is much easier than lowering greenhouse gases. But the essential quality of this particular plan would be that it is immediately reversible. You're not doing anything permanent. You're not doing something that can't be undone. You're not putting high altitude part. You get around the law of unintended consequences by doing something you just turn off. You just turn it off tomorrow. But I do know that, and this study's been lost, but I do know that somebody wrote, a climate scientist did a study, and he did it in the week or so after 9/11. And he noticed that there was a significant increase in the temperature of the Earth because the number of contrail shadows were down, which meant that the Earth was less cloudy than it would be because of these high-level contrails. And if you want to have a water injector behind those things or just squirt something in or make ice when there wasn't any, it's perfect. And what's even better about it is it's only cooling the parts of the planet that are supposedly emitting the most carbon, right? It's an industrial era issue. You just do it, and if it works, then stop doing it. And if it doesn't work, then stop doing it. But we're never given that, right? The whole point of the kind of commentary I would be able to do is to say, here's a solution that I just did on the back of an envelope, and here's the math on it. And why is it that the big brains back up there now, the idea of an engineering solution to them just never enters the picture, right? Why would you got a problem? You claim you got a problem? Here's how you fix it. It's simple. It's simple. It's inexpensive. You don't have to build a fleet of jets. The jets are already up there. Just do it. Find out how much it works. If it will work, something will work. There's no question it'll work. And then tweak as necessary. You've got too much, it's getting too cold, you've got too many jets in the cons, fly them above the cons or below, but you're almost always above the cons. Just change the altitude. I got this idea about the cons from DCS, because in DCS, you'll watch these guys in these fighter jets climbing, and somewhere around 20,000, 25,000 feet or something, they're invisible, and then you'll hear somebody like Growling Signwiner or somebody like that say, okay, he should be entering the cons any minute now. So there comes, for virtually every single day that's out there, comes a point when you get to an altitude where the combination of the moisture and the temperature out of the jet and the condensation of the air creates contrails at a certain altitude. Below that or above that, it's either too warm or too cold for this to happen. So you just reroute the jets into the contrails. And the beautiful thing about this idea, see, this is why I like being able to do this kind of commentary. The beautiful thing about this idea is not only would it work, but if it turned out that the Earth wasn't cooling quickly enough, then you'd need to travel more by jet airplane. The idea of saying no one can travel by jet because the carbon, whatever carbon it puts out, is offset by a factor of 2, 3, 500 by the amount of shade it throws. And not only that, but with this plane you get the best of both worlds, right? The Earth would be whatever temperature you want it to be by determining how many planes you put into the contrails, and you get more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means the plants grow easier and you get more crops and you get all kinds of things. Ta-da! Welcome to 1966, you miserable low-life idiots. Jesus, what is the matter with you people? I think it's a grand idea. I really do. And that's actually a pretty good example of a test. That's probably what I should do first. I'll do a little research on this. I'll find some sources. I'll sit there, I'll talk to the TV screen, and then I'll just go out there and shake my fist and say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Dare somebody to tell me why that wouldn't work. What's the worst case scenario? No effect? Okay. What's the worst case scenario? Well, it's cooling like crazy. Or, for some reason, it's warming things up. And stop doing it. You go back to what we were doing before. So, I just want to break this stuff down. Yeah, I will talk to Bert about this. Because Bert knows an awful lot about aviation, he knows an awful lot about global warming. I want to do something like this, a little bit of research. And see, now everything's kind of coming together, right? Now, I can have a guy who was educated in the early 60s in an American public school, or at least in the late 50s, and he doesn't have expensive computers up there. And he says, okay, so we know that the cooling rate of this, you use the actual data, right? You're using actual data. So greenhouse gas is this, so on and so forth. This much reduction in temperature. Get the slide rule out, right? It's 14.2%. It's 14.2 times 726 is right. Yeah. Do it. And AOC says we have fleets of aircraft at Davis Monthan Air Force Base that can fly no emissions. You don't need them. You've got 45,000 flights in the U.S. alone every single day. You don't need them. It's like Uber. It's like you don't need to go out and buy a fleet of cars for Uber to work. The cars are already there. You just need to organize this stuff. This kills so many birds in one stone. It just make me happy. It'd be able to take apart the global warming thing, and you'd be able to take apart the chemtrails thing. I think it'd be fun. I'm going to try that. I've got an actual target. I know it advances our ability to do the colonies through making the characters as realistic as possible. Gives us a chance to see how realistic we can make them. It gives me a chance to do political commentary. It gives me a chance to do all of this stuff. And Battlesmurf says, instead of Don't Be an Idiot, Let's Quit Being Idiots, a series of short shows. Yeah. And, by the way, it allows me to do a Don't Be an Idiot show, and it gives me finally a context to do it. I can do it from this guy. It's like messages back to the earth, Don't be an idiot. What do you mean you don't know how planes fly? Did you not graduate 4th grade? What's the matter with you? You've never heard of Bernoulli's principle? Seriously? Is that how bad things have gotten down there? All right, we'll solve this problem in 3 minutes too. And just have this guy kind of have this attitude, just kind of like, it's not, he can't be really angry. He just has to be frustrated and a bit edgy, quite a bit edgy. Well, you don't know how to do that? Really? Okay. We could do this in 7th grade back in 1957, but okay. Here's the math. We'll just do the math in our head. Okay, so get out your phone if you can't do it. No wonder everything's going to hell up there. I love this idea, says Eric. I loved it too. Now I've got a target. And so maybe the thing would be, instead of like daily commentary, maybe if Biden does another one of his Sieg Heil red and black speeches, you could comment on that. But really, what this would be doing would be a way to look at all of the self-inflicted problems that we have, and come up with a solution for them, right? There was a shooting in Nashville as we record this, a few hours before we record this. And this would be an excellent opportunity for me to go to what I first realized when I heard about the shooting, and that is that when guns were everywhere, there were no mass shootings. When kids played with guns all the time, there were no mass shootings. When you could walk into a Sears and walk out with an armful of guns and ammunition, there were no mass shootings. So the idea that it's related to guns is demonstrably false. Your problem is you don't have any dads up there. Then you could actually take this into being, and this is something that I've been thinking about too. I haven't heard him lately, but there was a guy out there, we did a right angle on him, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. He was a YouTube channel, he had huge numbers, and he was basically being the father that these millennials and Gen Zers never had. So he would do things like, here's how you tie a tie. Here's how you change a tire. That kind of thing could be good. Yeah, Sad Wings Raging says when lunatics were institutionalized, we didn't have this either. See, this gives me a chance to what this does is this gives me a chance to comment on American problems as an American, but from outside of America. That's what I want. I want to be able to do it from the outside, as if this is the stupid timeline and something really bad happened right around 67, 68. Yeah, yeah. This has got me thinking in a good way. All right, so let me take a couple questions, and then I will get home and get to work on all of this cool stuff. Was it Dad? How do I? I'm just curious to see if since I got YouTube right here, let me just see if he's what he's doing here. Four and a half million subscribers, and his last video was 6 days ago. His numbers are down significantly. Dad, how do I tie a tie? 2 million views. I'm not trying to walk into this guy's space. It's brilliant, and he owns it. But I do think that as long as it wasn't too on the nose, this would be essentially what this would be is, how do I be a steely-eyed missile man? And it's not for everybody because not everybody wants to be a steely-eyed missile man. But that would be it. How do I be a steely-eyed missile man? I'm liking this a lot. Okay, I got a lot to think about and a lot of stuff to do. But I think I was just on the tail end of this topic. I was looking at yet another video on the trans movement, and Dylan Mulvaney and all the rest of it. It was from some different guy I hadn't seen before. And this explosion in kids thinking they're trans has happened instantly in terms of within the last year or two. In the Sacred Order of Knightly Valor is in the 1960s, before it was cool to be stupid. See, now that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, buddy. Before it was cool to be stupid, before it was cool to be weak, before it was cool to be a victim, before it was cool to be helpless, before it was cool to be dependent, all of this stuff. So with the trans thing, right, it's like, where did all this stuff come from? There's no question that a lot of it's coming down from the top, but also true that that what I think is causing this is, I've been talking for years and years and years now about women warriors, about these kick-ass women and these weak men that we're seeing in our movies, right? Luke Skywalker, for example, goes from being a hero to being this kind of weak old crybaby. All the male characters are just there to basically, look stupid so that the women can look smart. I think that one of the reasons that we're seeing this explosion in so-called trans kids is because we no longer have role models that are clearly separated. Now our role models are essentially interchangeable. The biological females can beat the hell out of everybody, and the biological males sit in the corner and cry. And so when you present, and these are young kids generally, when you no longer have this divergence of role models, when there's no longer a big clarity between what a man should be and what a woman should be, then, of course, you have this confusion, right? What difference does it make, honestly? You look at it in the culture today, it's like, well, do you want to be a male or a female? What difference does it make? There's no difference between the two. I've spoken about this many times, but it's just very powerful. One of my favorite movies ever was called The Artist, and it was a silent movie made, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. A terrific silent movie about a silent movie star who's past his prime. He falls in love with this young upcoming movie star. She's worshipped him from afar forever. She becomes phenomenally successful. He becomes less and less relevant, but she still loves him, and happy ending. And you've got these characters doing these incredible dance numbers, and the actor playing the movie star is always got his hair completely slicked back. He's got a pencil thin mustache, you know. He's always dressed. Most of the time, he's in a either tuxedo and tails or something. The woman is always beautiful. She's always wearing a dress. She's always gorgeous. When they have the dance number, she's in a gown. It's like there are these two binary things, male and female. Perfect. It's great. And then I saw the actors being interviewed on, you know, Good Morning America or whatever. And the guy has got, you know, he's got a 5 o'clock shadow, and he's wearing a baggy T-shirt, and he's kind of slumping on the thing, and he's looking down, and the woman looks like dressed exactly like he is. They're both wearing jeans and T-shirts. And I looked at this, I said, well, who are these people? Who are they? And that's part of the problem. You know, that's the issue. It was Errol Flynn, exactly right, said Wings. That's who he was. He was Errol Flynn. And I think that's something that could be talked about as well. Getting all kind of ideas on this now. Eric says, ironically, 5 o'clock shadow is considered manly nowadays. You know why that is? You know why stubble is so prevalent today? Is because it's about the only way you can signal that you're a male, and it's one of the few ways to make boys look like man boys. You look at the faces of people who are movie stars today, and I'm including guys who I like a lot, like Brad Pitt. You know, looks like a girl compared to Rock Hudson or any of those guys. They all look like girls. The only person I've seen in the modern era who doesn't look like a girl is John Hamm. And when you see John Hamm on Saturday Night Live, or when you see John Hamm interviewed, he doesn't look nearly as impressive as Don Draper does. Not even close. Don Draper is freaking phenomenal. Right? He's phenomenal. And then you see John Hamm, and he's like, yeah, it's okay. Henry Cavill also has that effect. When Cavill's, what did I see him recently? And it was dressed to the nines and stuff. Oh, was it the Tom Cruise movie? Maybe. Yeah, he doesn't look like a kid. Doesn't look like a boy. All right. Anyway, let's knock a couple questions down, and then I got more things to get to work on as usual. Okay. Members. Fall room. Somebody was saying they had a 3-word question. I will take that question. I'm going to scan for a 3-word question. I'll take that first. And as usual, I won't get to nearly enough of them. And as usual, I feel really bad about that. And as usual, there's so much I can do about it. So there we go. Scanning. Hey, there's a picture of Eric Blake at long last. How about that? Yes. Okay. Did I miss a page? I don't think I did. I'll see if I can get all these. I'll try to get most of them. All right, Ian Noland. First of all, Bill, for your information, there is no longer a standard meter or foot for that matter. They've changed it to be based off the distance light travels in a period of time. Yeah, it used to be a certain number of angstroms long, but I know that there was an actual meter. I don't know if it still exists, but I don't know what good it does anyway. Anyway, have you thought about how many seasons you want to tell the colony stories across? If we were to go to parallels of America's foundings, there are a few decades of buildup between the colonies and the king, then the Revolutionary War, then another several decades of tensions, then 1812, and the story resolves at that point. how many seasons would you give each era? I don't. I I don't see a limit on this thing. There is, I guess, the best way I can describe timeline granularity is The Simpsons have been out for 30 years now, and Bart's still 10 years old. Especially if you're dealing with CG characters, they don't particularly age. You'd want to age them, but you get the idea. I don't want to think of it in terms of seasons. I want to think of it in terms of Star Trek. I just love the idea of a template that is so clear in terms of what is its identity. We all know what the identity of classic Star Trek is. And then many iterations have gotten further and further away from that, to the point where the D word is, Star Trek D is, it's not Star Trek. It's not even close to Star Trek. It's anti-Star Trek. I refuse to call it Star Trek. It's not Star Trek. It's fan fiction in my mind. It's not canon, period. And look, that's inevitable. That's just the way things go, right? Apple Computer starts out in a garage and is innovative and hungry and aggressive and brilliant and all of those things. Then finally it becomes so successful that it becomes a fossilized dinosaur and it's time for somebody else to eat its lunch. Same thing will eventually happen to SpaceX, and the same thing will eventually happen to this. But Star Trek got a solid 50 years, I would say. And that affected billions of lives, and I'm one of them. So a show needs to have a beginning, middle, and end, yes. Better to burn out than fade away. Also true, however, as an example, Star Trek created the world of, I don't even know, what's it, 23 or whatever. The original series is set in a time period. I used to know the exact date, but I don't anymore. And then Next Generation occurred 60, 70 years after that. And then, Enterprise occurred before that. So, you can basically put a pin in it and take it from there. I'm not a fan of prequels as a general rule because I think it's like time travel. You start doing things in prequels that affect everything downstream. Like in The Last Jedi, when turns out that you can go into hyperdrive and go through solid objects, then why even have X-Wing fighters or any of that stuff? Why not just put a hyperdrive on a brick, aim it at the fleet or the destroyer, turn it on, destroyed. Since that is a prequel, it's destroyed Star Wars. It's destroyed the whole idea of Star Wars. They're too lazy to realize it. I want something cool. Okay? You could have done it, just in that particular example, if you had respect for canon and you understood that you can't pull threads out of a tapestry without things happening to other threads in the tapestry. You could have had the exact same thing. Look, you wanted to fix that one scene, just that one scene in Last Jedi. What you do is you don't have the character of Admiral Holdo at all. She's just not there, period. Just doesn't exist because it's a miserable, horrible character. It is nothing more than Kathleen Kennedy wanting to have her own voice in the thing. So if you want to take her out of it, you've got to buy time so the people can escape. The fact that the ships are moving at exactly the same top speed was ridiculous. There's the laziest script of all time, but nevertheless, there is no Holdo. Leia decides that in order to buy time, she's going to have to pull up Taffy 3, turn around, and go fight this overwhelming force. So she aims her ship at the lead thing, and then just runs it up to top speed. She didn't go into hyperdrive, just runs it up to top speed. You have a physical collision, and that physical collision just cascades and takes out the rest of the fleet. It's not quite as dramatic as that flash of lightning, but you don't destroy the entire franchise doing it. Dave Bigbudia calls her Admiral Sappho McPurple Hair. Yeah, exactly. So, using Star Wars as an example, the original Star Wars which was called Star Wars. I refuse to call it A New Hope. The movie Star Wars caught everything, right? In Star Wars, you get everything you need, and that's why it became such a popular movie. The Empire Strikes Back was an elaboration on and added additional material to what the original story was. didn't negate the original story. And 3 failed to be nearly as good because they made a decision to go with these frickin' Ewoks instead of Wookiees because they wanted to sell more toys. But essentially, the first trilogy, it's all Star Wars. It's all the same universe. It's not forget universe. It's the same moral framework. Fun, adventure, not too serious, but serious enough to get some tears out of people, right? Boom. Then along comes the prequels, and they took all the Star Wars out of Star Wars. Forget the fact that they used all this CG that looked crummy. If you'd done the prequels as live action, you'd still have nothing but talking. You'd still have... I did not realize that. Dave Big Booty, I never ever realized that. Dave Big Booty says Ewok is Wookiee backwards. It's close to that. It's certainly Ewok and Wookiee. Never realized that, but yeah, you get the idea. So the prequels were done by George Lucas completely, and they weren't Star Wars. And the reason they weren't Star Wars, they had lightsabers, they had Yoda, they had space battles, but it wasn't Star Wars. You know why? It's really easy for me. The reason that the prequels and the Jar Jar, you could have survived all of that, but the reason that the prequels weren't Star Wars is because they were missing the one single element that made Star Wars, and that was they weren't any fun. They weren't any fun. And you can't overcome that. And then by the time you got to the sequels, the final 3, now the first one, right, Force Awakens, is a remake of episode 4. It's a remake of Star Wars, right? Exact same things. The exact same story, just remade. Except you've got all the girl power things, and Rey can, fly a ship. She never learned how to fly before, but she can fly the Millennium Falcon better than Han Solo, and she's never picked up a lightsaber before, but she can defeat the ultimate bad guy. All of that nonsense we've been over time and time again. However, I think my favorite of the post-original trilogy movies was Rogue One. Rogue One was Star Wars. It wasn't particularly fun, but neither was Empire Strikes Back, but it had the essence of it. Now, yeah, Sad Wings Raging says Star Wars is just, it's wearing a skin suit now. It's just a skin suit called Star Wars. Star Wars is dead. It's gone. And there's nothing new. No one's ever done anything new. The reason space combat looked so good in the original Star Trek was because they didn't have the budget to put the two ships in the same shot. It was just too expensive. So the Enterprise fires its phasers. That's one shot. And then the Klingon ship gets hit with phasers. That's another shot. You assume that they're out of visual range because it is, after all, the 23rd century. And then as soon as they get a budget, right, now we got the Enterprise doing its dogfight thing, and oh, look at that. The thing passed us by at 200 yards. Missed. Just missed. That would have killed Star Wars in the beginning. And I'm not even talking about Discovery and, having a creature having a hissy fit that destroys all of the lithium crystals in the universe and all the rest of that crap. So what I'm trying to do in terms of answering your question is I'm trying to create a moral framework. That's it. I'm trying to create a moral framework for storytelling. I want a universe where the normality is the moral framework that I think is most appropriate. That's what Roddenberry did with Star Trek. He created a TV show that was a moral framework for his what was then progressive liberal philosophy, which at the time I would consider myself to be a liberal as well, and so would you. Right? Equal rights for women, equal rights, all the different races, no more racism, all that other stuff. That's what he was trying to get across. Create a world where people could see no racism in the bridge because it wasn't quota hiring, and it was just, these are the best people in the fleet. So create this moral universe, and you get to tell the story that you want to tell, which is, the meta story is, this is what I want the future to look like. That's what Star Trek is, and that's what Star Wars is. It's what I want the future to look like. I want it to be fun. I want it to be beat up, ragged. I want a kid to be able to get on a bike, essentially, and go out in space and destroy this ultimate power. Just have him be a kid. Could never get away with that in Star Trek, not in the original series, but that's why they're different moral universes. Star Wars is much looser in terms of the science. It's also looser in terms of its accessibility. You got a farm boy who becomes the hero of the galaxy. Meanwhile, James T. Kirk in the original series was described at the Academy as a stack of books with legs. That is so important. When I first saw the trailer for the reboot, and Kirk fistfights his way into becoming Enterprise captain, rides his motorcycle, lips off the cops. No, Kirk became the youngest captain of a Constitutional class starship because he worked harder than anybody else, and he was more original. He took it more seriously. He was a stack of books with legs. That's harder than just being a guy who's good looking, happens to be in a bar at the right time. So the reboot was basically lowering the standards of Kirk to match the lower standards of the audience. We don't want to work at this. We don't want to have to study for 15 years to become captain of the Enterprise. We just want to be able to punch our way into it and ride a motorcycle and be sassy and stuff and get it like that. No work. And by the way, in the Jar Jar Abrams Star Trek universe, Kirk never did anything other than be captain, right? He joined Starfleet. He's a cadet. He gets on the Enterprise. You know what? We better make you captain. He was never an ensign, never worked 3 years in the engineering department, never was a helmsman for 4 or 5 years. Kirk had all of that backstory. You didn't see it, but he worked his ass off. Dave Big Booty says movie Kirk was the way he was because his dad died. Exactly. That's a quick fix. We're going to make you captain of the Enterprise because your dad, not you, because your dad did something so amazing that you've got this magical bloodline ability to be awesome at this. It's just a joke. It's a joke. They didn't have to do it that way. Chris Pine made a decent Kirk. He was very rarely actually Kirk, mostly just running around and being handsome and punching things. But I, didn't have any problem believing him during those moments. But yeah, he's a Kirk Sue. Thank you for that, Patrick Lamar. You win a gold star for the internet today. He was a Kirky Sue, right? Yeah, I'm a Kirky Sue. Yeah, what you can be captain of the Enterprise? Yeah. How come? Because my dad did something really impressive for 4 minutes. So, to answer your question, I don't have a season limit because I'd like this to do what Star Trek did, and that is metastasize all throughout culture, right? You get these fan fictions, you get these novels, you got all this stuff. Even if you get the slash that comes with it, that's fine. You get all these different things, and you got people living in the same moral framework, and that moral framework is the framework that Roddenberry wanted, right? Star Trek used to be described as the future that works, which is why Star Trek D is the antithesis of Star Trek. It's a future where we've put our racism behind us, and we put our ignorance behind us, and we put our internationalism behind us, and now we're just out there doing that. Now, I'm not that naive. In the Star Trek future, nobody has to work. So, since nobody has to work, everybody maximizes their life, right? If you don't have to work, then you get to be a painter or a scholar or anything. That would be nice, but I've watched the world happen where there's universal access to the information pool available to the human race. Everything we've ever learned is available at the touch of a button now. And I could get multiple degrees and PhD level degrees in any number of subjects for free. And I've done a fair amount of historical research, so I've gotten something out of it, but mostly people use the internet for porn and internet games. That's the reality of the human condition. This is where Roddenberry got it wrong. I'm going to try to not get it wrong. I'm going to try to basically show that people are the kind of creatures that would normally do things like use the internet for porn and video games, except that there is a set of external circumstances, namely the quality of life on the frontier, that forces them to be better people than they would be if they were just living a life of luxury in the cities. So there you go. Joe Roth. Hey, Bill, have you ever watched the documentary series Innocence Betrayed? I have not. Never heard of it. It's about the history of gun control all around the world and how disarmed populations fell victim to genocide in the 20th century. That I have heard of. The documentary is 20 years old, but it's one of those films that holds up well. It's about an hour long. There's some gruesome footage and disturbing images in it, too. I recommend it and should be required viewing in every high school in America. You can buy the DVD on Amazon, but here it is on YouTube. Definitely watch it if I haven't already. And there's a link. Thank you, Joe. I'll take a look at that. This is what I'm talking about in terms of showing things instead of telling people things. If you have a frontier family, not only does the dad have to be armed, everybody has to know how to use those weapons, right? You don't live in a world where people are piled one on top of each other, so you have nothing to do but murder people. That's a city problem. That's what they're getting away from when they leave, future Los Angeles. Take a risk out there. They're getting away from the city problems, which are violence, crime, overcrowding, and insanity that comes from raising human beings in metal or concrete boxes. So when you get out on the frontier, everybody has to be armed and everybody has to be versed in how to use those weapons. And because they don't go around murdering people. There's no incentive for it. Not to say that there aren't criminals out there. There are, and murderers, just like in the Old West. But, people talk about the Old West being so lawless. We still talk about the OK Corral as if it happened yesterday. Gunfight at the OK Corral killed, 4 people? What's that, a couple hours on a Friday night in Chicago? Right? So that's what we're trying to do, is build that moral framework. Moving on. John West, do the colonies have constitutions? If not, could the members perhaps submit entries for consideration? The best could be forwarded to Elon for use in real life. This is one of the timelines that I don't talk much about. I've got the 5 stories. I've got the naval warfare story. I've got the exploration story. I've got the homestead story, where I'd spend most of my time talking. I've got the kind of the free trader story that allows us to see all different aspects of the universe, because they're basically running, they're just a tramp steamer making their way from one place to another. And then you've got the upper level political story. And then the political story is the one probably that I talk about the least, because it's got the least action. It needs to be there. There are elements of the original series where they talk, but it's not nearly as much talking as Next Generation, just as in the prequels on Star Wars are all talking. There was some talking and some backstory in the original trilogy, but it's not what it was about. But with that said, yeah, and not only do they all have Constitution suggestions, you also have the Constitutional Convention problems. You're going to have these different worlds that are going to want to be together for mutual defense and assistance, because they know they can't outfight this power that's coming after them. But at the same time, they have different requirements. That's all got to be worked out. It's not going to be on a one-to-one basis. It's not going to be some planets where they need slaves or anything, but they're going to have different requirements. And then we're going to show how they solve those problems of a high population world versus a small population world, right? That's what the U.S. government and the Constitution, that was their fundamental problem. It's not their solution, but their problem was, okay, how do we make an agreement that Rhode Island and New York both want to sign? New York is going to say, we've got more people than Rhode Island. Of course we should have more influence. Rhode Island's going to say, well, if that's the case, why do we even join? We're going to get outvoted on everything. Might as well be part of New York. You guys can just kiss my butt. We're leaving. So you had to find a solution that both parties could live with. New York has far more weight in the House of Representatives, but in the Senate, Rhode Island and New York have exactly the same amount of power. That's how you made the compromise that got us the United States. And the ability to have those arguments is what makes the political story work. You just don't want to do too much of it at one time. But essentially, you are teaching people how our country got founded by saying, okay, look, here's a water world for whatever reason. Here's a planet where there's, it's sub-zero and the atmosphere is no good. So here's a planet with, 800,000 people on the entire surface of the planet living in concrete or metal cubes. Here's another planet with 700 million people living outdoors and getting a suntan. How do you make an agreement that makes both of these people happy to tie their fates together? That's a problem. And that particular aspect of it is where I'm going to do most of the actual genuine historical research. Because when you get into what actually happened during the Constitutional Convention and get into the specifics of the problems that they brought, those I want to get pretty much right on the nose. Let's see. Well, one of them's about M&Ms in the Super Bowl from Eric, and I'm going to push that back to Thursday if you can. So here's a question from Eric Blake. So now that you've relatively free to tackle the colonies again, I thought about the diva turned geologist daughter. In a homesteading story, I've got this 15-year-old girl who was grabbed away from Earth. She's got friends and she's starting to get into trouble and going into nightclubs with false IDs, and Dad knows what's going to happen to her, so he just grabs her and they leave, and she's taken against her will, but not illegally. It's like when any other case where teenagers have to move because Dad moves and you don't want to go because you got friends and just have to deal with it. But she basically spends a whole season or two just sulking, and then eventually she starts to see the benefits of it and develops an interest in geology, at least off the top of my head. Now, if you have her backstory hammered out, apologize for my presumptuousness, but assuming it's open to enhancement or two, what if her early establishing introduction scenes involve her taking serious exception to the fact that the diamonds on the jewelry given to her by would-be boyfriend, not her dad, are fake? Mind you, she instantly notices they're fake the moment she looks at them. The scene simultaneously sets up two facts about her. She's a bit of a diva, and number two, she's very intelligent, observant, in her own diva sort of way. Her obsession with high-quality jewelry has just led her to having an ironic experience in precious metals and stones. The viewer will naturally focus on the spoiled diva exterior more than anything else, but as she becomes the colony's geological expert, we can look back at the simple setup from the very beginning. What say you? I don't like it because how does she know that they're not real? She doesn't have a metaphysical ability to tell these things. And furthermore, so if somebody gives you a fake diamond that looks good and you can tell it's a fake, then you already have to have some knowledge about things like mineralogy, geology, and so on in order to tell. So how did she develop that ability to tell? You could just say that she had it, but that's kind of a Mary Sue issue. And I want her to fall into it. The reason I picked geology was I wanted something as far away from what I would think she would be interested in as I could find. So she has to actually kind of fall into it. Keep them coming. I just don't particularly like that one. And I don't like the fact that, I'm talking not about the suggestion, Eric, just from a purely dramatic point of view. I don't want to make her evil. I want to make her naive, right? I don't want her to be the kind of person who's saying, well, these aren't real. There has to be a fundamental likability about these people, or else they're just going to become a complete drag and you're just going to have to kill them. She's got to be a good girl who's starting to develop the excitement of being with bad friends. That's what she has to be. She has to be a good girl who is suddenly, for whatever reason, starting to hang out with the cool crowd, and the attraction and the power of that social proof, the desire to want to get along, the desire to want to be popular, all of that motivation. The boy doesn't have any of that. He just doesn't give a damn. He's just interested in, it's just, all of it interests him. He doesn't particularly care, but social pressure is much higher on girls than it is on boys. And so she's got to be somebody who is good, who is going down the wrong path, and whose resentment is predicated on her having experienced just a taste of popularity and badness, naughtiness. And now that's been taken away from her. Now she has to live with her damn family, and so that's basically the attitude about that. So here's a three-word question, or technically four, I think, from Don Vickery. Riddick, Reacher, or Rip? I don't know who Rip is. I liked. I haven't seen any of the Reacher stories at all. I love Keanu Reeves. I like him on camera. I think he's one of the best people in Hollywood. I know he's one of the best people in Hollywood, and every time I see him, I like him so much that I'm partial to anything he's in. He's one of the few people in Hollywood that have an actual soul, and I am 1 degree of separation away from Keanu Reeves for reasons I'm not going to elaborate on. Oh, Ripley? Is it Ripley? Ripley. Oh, well, that's easy. Just get the names. Give me sure. Riddick, Ripley, or Wick. I'm going with Ripley all the way. Ripley's one of the greatest heroes in science fiction. It's one of the greatest characters in science fiction. I'm glad you got a chance to ask me that because, are we talking about Rip from Yellowstone? That Rip? Okay, I guess that's got to be that because I think Ripley is probably a red herring. I think it's Rip from Yellowstone. So I haven't seen any of Yellowstone except for a lot of clips. I've seen a lot of clips, and I started watching the clips because of Beth, is it? Because I thought she was just fantastic. I've known somebody very much like that. And she was just incredible. The first thing I ever saw from Yellowstone was that scene of her in the bar where she's getting hit on by some guy, and she just, smokes him. I think she's a great, great, great character. So through that character, I got to meet Rip, and then I watched a bunch of the clips. I saw the clips of the biker gang. I saw some of the fights and stuff. Yeah, Rip is pretty close to. He's pretty close to the ideal. I don't think I want. This is a great exercise for me. Dad can't start out being Rip. He can start out being a man. He can start out being like that. He's a strong guy, but he can't come to the scene being experienced. Rip, again, I know very little of it. Rip is Rip because he's been on the ranch forever, right? I mean, he's been. How long ago before the series did he get the brand, right? The Yellowstone brand. So he comes into the series fully formed as this kind of male ideal. He's tough. He's kind. He's doesn't put up with any crap, but he's not a jerk. He's not a butthole. He's not walking around looking for a fight. He's just ready to provide one if it's necessary. So I think he's a really good character, and I think that the father character in my story ends up being very much like a Rip. It's just he can't start that way because he's new to the frontier. He's got the stuff that. So look, if you think back to the Western frontier, which is predicated on, right? You get people who are coming out there. They've never been out west before. The number of people who are willing to get on a Conestoga wagon and then get to the location and build a log cabin with their own hands and an axe, that decision separates you away from 99.9% of the people who are just arriving in America from, overseas. But when you get out there, you've got to learn how to do it. There are, at least in the portrayals of the Old West, there are people who bring the East with them. They're kind of either dandies or they're lawyers or they're newspaper publishers. In Deadwood, the guy played by was it Jones? What's his name? The guy who was a principal on Ferris Bueller's Days Off. I want to say, can't be Jim Jones. I don't think. Whoever that actor is, he's the publisher in Deadwood. And he's an Easterner, and he never becomes a Westerner. He's always an Easterner. Jeffrey Jones, yes, thank you. He was great in that role, great. But you can tell that he's an Easterner out west. He needs physical protection. He's bringing newspaper and that kind of Eastern sort of sense of civilization and justice and all that other stuff. I'm going to ask questions, going to get to the bottom of this. Well, you're going to get punched in the face. But he was a great character, and so he was a person who came west but never became a Westerner. It's been so long I don't remember any of the characters now by name. The sheriff's partner, the Jewish guy who opened the goods store. He was a guy who clearly wasn't made from the Western mold, but there's no question he did become a Westerner. He was made to live out there. And then you've got Al Swearingen, who is essentially a soul. Yeah, thank you. Swearingen is on some level. Ultimately, when it's all said and done, he's kind of a rogue with a heart of gold. Although the first time you see him, one of his whores stabs a guy, and he basically goes to comfort her. You think, oh, what a nice pimp, and he basically knocks her to the ground, puts his boot on her neck, and tells her, you do this again, I'm going to just finish you off here. So he's kind of this badass, but time and time again, you find out he's not really a badass, mostly because of how he deals with the woman, the handicapped woman who's doing the swooping. But there was a period there when I just wanted to do nothing but write Ian McShane characters. Yeah, shot him through the head, right? You can look through and see him and stuff. So Swearingen was a ruthless guy, but he wasn't a bad guy. I never thought of him as a villain. Powers Booth character I thought of as a villain, but I never thought of Swearingen that way, and you're not supposed to. There's something about him that makes him admirable, in the same way that Archie Bunker is. He's like, on the surface, there's nothing to like about this guy, but there's heart there, and when you see the heart underneath, is when you realize that, no, this guy's worth loving. There's something about him. I just really love him. And we live in a world where, starting with Archie Bunker, any character that is unabashedly male and doesn't give a damn what other people think is automatically beloved by people like us. Denny Craig and Ron Swanson, great examples of, just hyper-masculinity that are originally written to be jokes that just take off. So there was a lot about Swearingen that you like, and there's a lot about Swearingen that was just plain evil. There's no question. But I never saw Swearingen do anything cruel on purpose for the fun of it. He was cruel to people on certain occasions when he needed them straightened out, but I never thought of him that way. So, anyway, let's see if I got the most of that. Yeah, so I'm going to go with I like Rip better than Reacher, because I don't know any of Reacher, and Riddick. That second movie was an interesting movie. The first movie was actually an interesting movie too. Was it Near Dark or Pitch Black or whatever? Pitch Black, I think. Whatever. That was a great little science fiction movie. The second one was an interesting science fiction movie. And Riddick was the same kind of way, right? He's a murderer, and he's a super villain, and he's all these other things, but you love him. He's got a heart. He cares. He's not a bad guy. He's an anti-hero. Let's see here. Okay. We get this one, and I think one more, 2 more, 3 more, 4. No, I was not going to get all 3 of these. All right, let me do Marusha's question here. AI and Chat GPT. Hey, Bill, since you said you're planning on doing more interviews, I was wondering if you could consider having Rob Miles on. He's an AI safety researcher, and I think he would give you decent pushback on your friend who claims that AGI will never happen. And here's a link. Sadly, all anyone seems to be talking about regarding ChatGPT is its woke bias, which is a shame and ignores its incredible potential. I myself have begun using it to learn better coding. The above video actually talks a bit about the bias question. Current image and text-based models are merely trying to predict the next word or pixel, and so ultimately are at the mercy of whatever samples are put in front of them. Knowing this, just as conservatives have abandoned the cultural front, where are the conservatives working to become AI engineers and help ensure their neutrality? I was listening to Scott Adams this morning make the case that human beings also operate on this predictive model and are not merely the result of whatever inputs are fed to us. He claims that AI will ultimately be banned not because it's intelligent and capable of thinking, but because it will definitively prove that we never were and never could. Because it's intelligent and capable of thinking, but because it will definitively prove we never were and never could, and that some of the skill of hypnotism only works because this model of human beings is true. So basically, Scott Adams, if I understand correctly, saying we'll eventually ban AI because it shows us how lack of free will humans have. In psychology, there's a related phenomenon known as the Pygmalion effect. I was wondering if you've ever heard of it. It's sort of a formalized version of if people knew better, they'd do better. See video below for more details. I know the Pygmalion effect is all right, let me see what I can make out of this. First of all, as far as the chat GPT goes, I spent some time playing with this a couple weeks ago. I was pretty underwhelmed. And the reason I was underwhelmed, and I think Marusha was pleased with its ability to write code, is because of the nature of what chat GPT is. It is a piece of software that is extremely good at problem solving. I know Scott raved about it. He asked it to write a business plan, and he said the business plan was just terrific. I made a particular effort to try to get to human emotional issues with this thing, and it just bounced off of them. And it was, at least it was upfront about bouncing off of them too. It was say, I am a chat bot. I do not have a consciousness, and so it was pretty honest about it. But I was not impressed by its ability to deal with human interaction type things. And this is the kind of AI that's very useful. It's the kind of AI that I think we all need. I certainly didn't consider it to be self-aware, even close to self-aware, not even close to self-aware. And people who are impressed by it, I'm not speaking about Marusha in this case particularly, but people who are impressed by, just kind of civilians who ask it questions and impressed by it, I think they're impressed by the fact that it does the one trick really well, but it's still a one-trick pony, I think. I was expecting to be a lot more impressed than I was in terms of how deep a conversation this thing is capable of giving. You try to have a deep conversation with it, and it just plain stops you. It says, "I'm not built for this," which is honest, and I respect. I have not had guests for a long time, and don't anticipate that happening in the immediate future either. I'd like to get back to doing interviews. I did a bunch of them once with a show format called After Hours. I probably did 8 or 10 of those. I don't think I'm going to be having him or anybody else on at the moment. And if I do get to the point where I'm going to do interviews, likely it would be somebody like Doomcock or somebody like that. Then this idea about the Pygmalion effect. So Pygmalion was My Fair Lady was essentially a remake of a reboot of the Pygmalion story. West Side Story was a Broadway retelling of Romeo and Juliet. Right? In Romeo and Juliet, it's the Capulets and the Montagues, and in West Side Story, it's the Sharks and the Jets. It's forbidden love between the two younger members of these families that are at war with each other all the time. So it's the same story. My Fair Lady is based on the Pygmalion myth, and the Pygmalion myth is the ability of a human being to create something that is as good as you are. It's about the arrogance of people who think that they can create something not only as great as they are or greater than they are. And I don't know what else to call it. I had a thought about this the other day. started looking more into the whole proteins thing, and we talked about this a couple times recently. The idea that life is getting more and more unlikely on a fundamental level. I think the case for intelligent life I've made several times, given all the things that have to happen, mostly with the moon. I find it very rare. But once you start getting into things like protein folding and there is no essential evolutionary path for DNA, that as a thought experiment, just as a thought experiment, I was driving to the studio last week or a week before, and there was a rare for us in Los Angeles, it was cloud cover, and there was this God ray, right? It's a hole in the clouds, so this God ray, sunlight coming down, sun setting, it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I see this God ray, and it's very, inspirational. And I thought to myself, if it could be proven that this was the only place that life evolved in the universe, at least within hundreds of light years, right? If we could just say there is no other life of any kind out there, period, would that be enough to convince some people that this was an act of intelligent design? Or is it a random element with some estimates I've seen are 10 to the power of 300 in terms of likelihood. That's, I think, the total number of habitable planets, best case scenario, in the observable universe is 10 to the 60th. So 10 to the 300th power, pretty damn unlikely. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, okay? For the sake of the argument, we could prove, because this is the point I'm trying to make. Let's say, for the sake of the argument, we could say there is no other life of any kind in the universe, and the chance of it happening on Earth was 10 to the 300th power. Would that be enough to make you give up a materialistic explanation of the universe and accept the idea that it was intelligent design, or would you stick to the materialistic, mechanistic view and saying, well, it may have been 10 to the 300th, but it came up, because if it hadn't come up, we wouldn't be here to talk about it. That's the anthropological explanation, right? It doesn't matter how rare life is on Earth. The fact that we're here means that number came up. Chance of you winning the lottery is 1 in 300 million, let's say. Somebody wins the lottery every week, basically. So it got to be one person. So if it turned out that there was no other life in the universe and it was all super, super unlikely chance here, would you agree that chance is so unlikely as to make it essentially impossible, or would you cling to the idea that the fact that we're here means it must have been chance? And this brings me to the reason I went through this whole example. A number of scientists, guys like Dawkins and so on, are psychologically incapable of admitting that it could be intelligently created. And I think I know the reason why for this. I think that for a certain kind of person, they often become scientists. If you were to accept that it is too unlikely to have happened mechanistically, and you bring intelligent design into it, some kind of a deity into it, and that deity can just be an infinitely more advanced technological creature if you want, just made this machine. That there is a certain amount of arrogance in guys like Dawkins that this offends them on some level, and it offends them because it tells them that there are things that they cannot know. Not them personally, but what that does is, if it's not an accident, then there is an entire kingdom of information that is not only unavailable to Dawkins, it is unavailable to any scientist ever. In other words, if the universe is a mechanical accident, and even if the chances are 1 in 300, 10 to the 300th, then guys like Dawkins can say, okay, so yes, it's an astronomically small chance that it happened, but it must have happened because here we are. We refuse to believe in intelligent design, and the reason they refuse to believe in it is because if it turns out that it is all a mechanistic accident, then you can know everything about it, right? And that appeals to their ego and their sense of importance. The lack of anything, well, just for the sake of the argument, if there's nothing supernatural, then you can understand everything eventually, right? There's nothing that is beyond the reach of science. Every question that can possibly be asked can be answered by science. There's nothing that is definitively off the table. There are just issues that are so complex that we don't understand them yet. But if we keep doing what we're doing, then we will understand them. This is the conceit of modern science, is that everything is knowable. Not everything is known, but everything is knowable. That's what modern science is predicated on. And if you say that this entire universe is a Fabergé egg designed by somebody else, then you are taking an entire element of knowledge and making it unknowable. In other words, if somebody created the box, what do we know about the person who created the box and the world they live in? Nothing. And we can't know. It's beyond our ability to know. And I think that really offends some people. I don't think they can deal with the ego slap of that. That's what I've come to believe, having lived on the other side of the fence for most of my life. The idea that there is something beyond knowledge is intolerable to guys like Dawkins. So they will come up with a mechanistic description for everything. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that they will never agree to the fact that the unlikeliness of it means there's some other hypothesis, because that hypothesis leaves them with a world that they have no access to. And since they have no access to, they can't figure it. It's beyond them. And that's the kind of egocentricity I see when I look at guys like Dawkins and a number of these other guys, some of the guys involved with SETI and so on. Sagan had this too, right? If you ask them, are there things that are not, there are many of things that are unknown, obviously. But if you ask these guys, whose religion is science, are there things that are unknowable? Most of them will say no. Most of them will say, no, there are just things that we don't know yet. And I find that to be extremely useful in terms of developing scientific theories and technology that comes away from it. Richard Dawkins. But I'm not so, I have over time become less my death grip on materialism has been weakened substantially. So I think that's really what drives it. I think ultimately what drives it is this egomaniacal Pygmalion effect of saying that we can create a knowledge of everything, that there is nothing beyond our ability to figure out. That's just a matter of time and technology and the right tools. We will figure out everything. Here's a great example of that. It's a very trivial, well, it's not trivial at all, actually. It's a great example of that. So stay with me here. For the last 60 or 70 years, physicists have been setting up experiment after experiment after experiment to provide something that used to be called the grand unification theory. So there are four forces in nature. There's the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force. And if I understand correctly from the outside, three of these can be explained away relatively simply, but you can't get the fourth one into the box. And so we've spent 50 years of doing physics experiments to try to confirm unification field theory, try to confirm a theory that explains all four of these forces together, because we are emotionally driven to the aesthetic elegance of that, right? Of course they have to, if there are four forces, then of course there has to be some explanation for how these four forces interact with each other. There has to be one theory. We haven't gotten there yet. This is what scientists are saying. And so the idea that three of them will fit in one box but the other one doesn't is intolerable to us for an emotional reason. So we therefore have to keep working and keep testing a way to find a string theory or whatever, so that all of these things that we see are nicely melded together, and then we'll know that we're on the right track. Well, they've done 50, 60 years of experiments trying to do it, and they keep coming up with nothing. The standard model works beautifully. It just doesn't combine the four forces. It works astonishingly well, but it doesn't put them all in the same box. And this is offensive to people on an aesthetic level. But what if the world is built that way, right? What if that's how it's built? There are four forces, and we have a theory that explains how three of them interact, and another one just doesn't. What if that's how it's built? What if it's not a question of having gotten there yet? What if it's built asymmetrically? And, there you go. They don't know what to do with that. Here we go. See, this idea that Mersh is arguing here is that the proof of God is a series of cryptic old allegories written in a dead language. That's not what has taken me away from a belief in a materialistic explanation of God. What's taken me away from it is very simple, is the experimentally proven, and when I say experimentally proven, I mean everything that we use in terms of electronics is predicated on this. If you pass a beam of light through a series of slits, it will behave like a particle if somebody's watching it and a wave if somebody isn't, or vice versa, I don't remember. That observing something changes the reality of it. It doesn't just change how it's recorded, the act of observation changes the structure of reality. That's not up for discussion. That aspect of physics is so solid that we've got multiple layers of technology predicated on the fact that your ability to observe something changes the outcome. So if the outcome is changed by the presence of an observer, then what you're saying is, what the science is saying, what the data is saying, is that the structure of the universe is determined by whether or not somebody's looking at it. And the more complex the observer is, the more detailed the observations, the more specific and nuanced the observation becomes, the universe essentially has to collapse. The universe has to essentially collapse quantum probabilities to the level of the question. I don't know if that's exactly clear. The more detailed and granular the observation, the more the universe has to make a decision in order to provide an answer. And it doesn't have to make that decision until somebody makes the observation. This is essentially what Schrodinger's cat is. Quantum says that the cat is neither dead nor alive. It is both alive and dead at the same time. It is in a state of death living. It is in both states simultaneously and neither of them simultaneously. And the reason that Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment is because quantum theory says that whatever's inside the box, cat is just an example, the particle or whatever's inside the box is not required to be one or the other because no one's looked at it, no one's observed it. When you open the box, then that cat has to be either dead or alive. The thought experiment is there's a fuse on a poison, and the cat inside a box, and it's got a precisely 50% chance, exact 50% to 3,000 digits of this being a 50-50 thing. So until you look in the box, the cat is neither dead nor alive. It's only when you open the box and look that it has to make a decision. Now, we're not talking about an actual cat, because an actual cat has already been, the probability structures to create a cat have happened a long time ago. But as a thought experiment, that's what they're saying. We don't know what this particle is until we look at it. And once we look at it, the particle has to make a decision. That's exactly what quantum is saying. It's not intuitive because it's not intuitive, because we've never had to deal with this before. We're not evolved to deal with quantum reality. Our consciousness is designed to maneuver us through the physical world in a way that is most likely to provide us with food and to reproduce. That's what our senses are designed for. There are entire spectrums of light that are not visible to us. There are entire conclusions, behaviors, all kinds of things that have nothing to do with, that have a lot to do with reality that we just don't have access to, because either it doesn't help us or it actually hurts us. For example, if you take a certain kind of mushroom or LSD or whatever, you will experience the world in a different way. And you can say that is artificial, but if we were born with a certain amount of LSD in our brains, and there was a survival advantage to be able to see the walls move and be able to taste colors and to be able to, see notes, musical notes, then that LSD in our brain would have been continued. I maintain that experience is real and it's going on all the time. I maintain that right now, all of the things that people experience on hallucinogens are not illusions. It's just a different perception of reality, and it is not only not pro-survival, it's anti-survival, which is why it's been selected out. If you see the walls breathing, that makes it less likely for you to be able to go out and find food and evade predators. And if you if you have a hallucinogenic experience where you can feel the connectedness of all of us, and that everything is connected to everything else, there's kind of ribosome in the ground, experience that I've had, that's swell and it's accurate and it's really there. It's just that if that's all you experience, you can have an encounter with the leopard and see how you're very deeply connected to the leopard, but that doesn't mean the leopard's not going to eat you. So I think we have evolved blinders to a lot of experiences in the world that these blinders are there as a result of our brain chemistry, that they're pro-survival, natural selection. I don't doubt natural selection at all. I don't doubt any of this macro evolution. I think the evidence for that's absolutely overwhelming. But we filter things predicated on what is the best outcome in terms of survival. So there's that, and so that's why you can't really process things that don't really fit into that kind of thing, Black Frankie says all of my hallucinogenic experiences have been very, very bad. Mine are really recent, like within last 2 years or so, and a lot of people thought, well, you may not like this. They were joyous. I spent the whole time laughing, in a state of wonder, just amazement, just oh my God. So the cell phone in my pocket works because of this uncertainty principle. It works because of the state of quantum, the fact that the universe is a series of probabilities, all of that stuff. That's why this stuff works. So it's not a question of whether this is real or not. This is how reality is constructed. It is constructed on a quantum level based on not only probabilities, but based on the fact that you have to observe the universe to bring it into existence. You have to observe it in order for it to make a decision. It's what they call compressing the quantum probabilities, right? So it can be something as simple as whether a cat is alive or dead, but really what it means is this particle in this position or that position? It's in both and neither. until you look. When you look, now it has to make a decision. Now it's over here. That's what quantum says. And we can't process that emotionally. We just know that intellectually, if we accept this to be true, we get results that produce remarkably good theory and, in fact, workable technology. Standard model of physics says that things like electromagnetism and gravity are the exchange of particles between two objects. That's not what. There are no particles. That's just the limit of our horsepower. It's a useful way of explaining what's actually happening. But there are no little particles. There are no little spheres that are coming out of us, right? That's just what we can use to predict. And not only am I not mocking this, on the contrary, I think it is absolutely beyond imagination, unbelievably cool that a bunch of tree apes can figure this stuff out. I think it's absolutely astonishing. It makes me proud to be a human being, and I never cease to be amazed and delighted in the things that we're able to figure out given our horsepower restrictions. It's astonishing, but they're just theories. When I say just theories, they are maps. They're not the territory. Maps are very useful. Getting from Texas one place to another with a map, great. But that map isn't Texas. Texas consists of hundreds of trillions of dust particles, not to mention all the things on it and the things underneath it. That's what Texas really is. The map of Texas is hundreds and hundreds of orders of magnitude more simpler than Texas, but it's useful. It gets us a result that is useful. I'm here. I want to go over there. Okay, we follow this road. Great. That's not Texas. It's just a map of Texas. These theories aren't reality. They're just a map of reality. They're useful ways for understand something that is so far beyond our ability to completely understand that it's easy to mistake the two. And that's kind of where I'm going. These guys think that the map is the territory. It's not. Because they're map makers. That's their job. They're making maps. They sell maps, and they love making maps. So they believe the map is the territory, and they also believe that the more detailed the map becomes, the closer to reality it is, and that's true. But the map will never be the territory. That's why I think they've got a problem. Lovey Lance with a super chat says, "Have you heard of Have you heard of Bell's theorem? It shows that photons do not have a predetermined state, which means that, at least on the quantum level, the universe is not determined." The universe is not determined. That's a beautiful way of putting it. That's what the science shows us, is that it's not determined, that it has to be observed. And if it has to be observed, then you have to ask yourself, are we the most advanced consciousness that you can conceive of? Or is it possible for you to conceive of a consciousness greater than ours? And this kind of goes to the AI thing, right? There are some people who the only way they can conceive of a mind much, much greater than their own is if we built it. This is why I keep coming back to ego in these hard AI and guys like Dawkins, right? Is the ego involved? Is there an intelligence unknowably greater than ours? Well, only if we build it. But you do believe that it's possible for us to build an AI, which then builds an AI, which then builds an AI that becomes so intelligent that we simply can no longer understand what it's doing, right? Oh, yeah, we believe that, no problem. And you also believe that if we build an AI that builds an AI that builds an AI that builds an AI, it'll be able to develop technology that is indistinguishable from magic, right? Absolutely, yes. But you can't accept the fact that something you didn't build is already at that level of intelligence and technology as to appear magical. No, I can't buy that. Why? That's ego. That's Pygmalion effect. I can understand science. We can understand everything. We just need more time and better instruments. And if there's something beyond our limit of understanding, then we have to be the people who built that. That's what I keep seeing in these arguments. I just keep coming back to this. And to me, that's just plain human and extremely understandable. But it doesn't mean it's true. And the dismissiveness of it. I don't know. I may trot this out for the next episode. There are animations of certain genetic functions, DNA functions, so on, DNA replication, RNA, all this stuff. And in these animations, they show molecules going down a line of other molecules, unzipping DNA or adding it or whatever. And this molecule, this protein, walks down this thing and creates it. And if you look at the functions of these things, it gets them over here, picks one of these up, puts it down, picks one of these up, puts it down. When you look at these animations, it's impossible to look at them if you have an open mind and not see an assembly line of robots. If you had to build a machine to make DNA out of atoms, it would look exactly like this. The argument is that, well, okay, yes, this is what it looks like, but it happened randomly. And I used to have no problem believing that. Well, no problem. Lightning, you put a little electric spark through hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia, amino acids, there we go, fantastic. But the replication mechanism, there is no V0 of that. And the more I think about this, the more of an obstacle it becomes to the randomness model. It just becomes less and less likely to me. And somewhere along the line, I decided to detach my ego from it and just accept the possibility that there are things beyond, not only beyond my knowledge or human knowledge, but beyond any knowledge. It is inaccessible. And I think that ultimately that is the ego thing, is that they cannot accept that there are inaccessible things, that everything must be able to be discovered or figured out one way or another. If it takes us 1 billion years and the right kind of, it doesn't matter. There's a way to understand everything. But what if there's not? What if there are things like, what if the universe is built so the three forces can interact with each other and the fourth one doesn't? Well, that's not very elegant. No, it's not. So you have an emotional reaction to it. This is what these people and physicists are saying now. A number of these physicists, and what's the name of this German woman who has this great channel, mathematical channel? This is where I first heard it from. She's been watching these guys try to do this unified field theory for 70 years, taking all of the budget, all of the money, failing. When we have a perfectly good model that works just fine, only we're not using it because we don't like it emotionally. It just something appeals, Sabian, yeah. Something about it bothers us on an emotional level. So we're going to keep trying to get all four of these things in a nice, neat little box like E equals MC squared. But what if things are not built that way? This is the kind of arrogance that I'm talking about. And it's subliminal arrogance. I'm not accusing them of being aware of what they're doing. I'm just saying that they do it. They just cannot escape. Science is supposed to eliminate emotion from the equation. That's why science is as effective as it is. I believe something to be true. Okay, that's great. I want to believe it to be true. Okay, fantastic. That's great. Prove it. So you provide an experiment. The experiment produces results that back up your theory. Great. Now, somebody who doesn't believe in what you believe should be able to set up that experiment exactly the way that you did, produce the same results, crank the machine the same way you did, and get the same thing comes out of it. And if it does, then that means that person who doesn't like your theory is wrong. That's how it's supposed to work. I like it, I don't. This is an emotional response, so is this. Where's the truth? Well, let's take somebody who believes in it, somebody who doesn't believe in it. Let's give them an experiment. This guy says the experiment proves that this is the case. If these numbers come out, then it's true. The other person says, I don't believe this is the case. If those numbers do come out and it is true, then it's true. Give it to him, he does it, he cranks the machine, those numbers come out, it's true, he's wrong. Most people would say, oh, I was wrong about that. Some people will say, no, I know I'm right. I know I'm right because I believe I'm right. Therefore, there's something wrong with the experiment, or there's something outside the bounds of the experiment. There's some special pleading or some kind of manipulation that we can do. There's something we're missing because I know I'm right, and I don't care what the experiment proves. Now, that's not science. And that's what physics has been doing for 50, 60, 70 years now. It's dishonest. It's not... Asa Fendi says Niels Bohr was humbled before was humbled before God. He spelled Nils as Kneels. But it's a lack of humility. So that's kind of where I am now, and that's just a scroll was paused for some reason, and that's, which is probably good. Otherwise, I would have just chased the thing around. Leva Lance again for a super chat says, a good carpenter can build you a table. A master carpenter can make you a masterpiece table, but only this ultimate carpenter can build a universe in which there will be a master carpenter that makes you a perfect table. Yes. Yes. Now, Marusha here says, what's the takeaway? The scientific method was formalized by Bacon, but the process itself has existed as long as consciousness has. I disagree. Scientific inquiry has not existed since we've existed, or else we would have had a whole lot more science. People think science is either some kind of a skill set or a museum or something. It's not. It's just a simple way of thinking about things. It is a procedure. Science is a procedure. It's a procedure designed to ping nature, and then it's designed to determine whether or not the echo we get back is true or not, right? And that's what science is. Scientific thinking hasn't been here forever. Scientific thinking is, if it had been here forever, we would have been on Mars 100,000 years ago. It's not. It's an invention, and furthermore, it is an invention that has to have a suitable moral framework in order to develop it. In other words, if you are going to pursue science, and science is showing you that the Earth is not the center of the universe and that life is not necessarily miraculous, that life can be understood as a series of chemical processes, if that's what your science is leading you to, you have to live in a society where you don't get put to death for that kind of thing, right? And that's why Western science is science. That's why Western societies are so successful, because we are willing as a society, we have the moral flexibility to accept things like the science is proving that maybe there's not a God. The science is showing us, let me clarify. The science is showing us a pathway to get to this thing that we thought was miraculous. Therefore, why go with the supernatural explanation when we have a natural one? Up until the Middle Ages, we would put people like that to death here, and in most other countries around the world, it still basically happens. You have to have the moral openness and the moral courage to follow where those breadcrumbs lead you, and that's fine. But what I find is that this is a one-way path, that science is willing to go down this pathway into the deepest reaches of material mechanistic explanations, which is great, but if they run up against a dead end, they're not willing to walk back again at all. They just will not. And this is why you will never change Hawking's mind. Because if you change Hawking's mind, he's not Hawking's anymore. That's how deep his ego investment is in this theory. It's not about theory now. It's not about science now. It's about identity. It's about existence. If you were to provide a series of proofs to him, I don't believe he'd be willing to accept that he was wrong about everything. And I am willing to believe I'm wrong about everything. That's the difference. That's why I can see both sides of this issue. So, there you go. Of all the people in history, all the scientists in history, the one who deserves the most moral credit is Kepler. He's the one who I think is the most admirable scientist from a moral courage point of view, because Kepler was deeply religious, and Kepler took what Copernicus had theorized about the Earth being not the center of the universe, the sun being the center of the universe, and Kepler started working on the structure of orbits. And we use Kepler's equations to this day, but the part about Kepler that was so honest and so worthy of admiration was because as a deeply religious individual, Kepler was convinced that if this theory is true, if the sun is the center of the universe, and the planets orbit the sun, then they have to move in perfect circles because God is perfect. The idea that it would be anything other than a perfect circle was as repulsive to Kepler as the idea that three forces can be explained by, but you can't put the fourth together. The universe cannot be built like that. That's an emotional reaction. Can't be true. I believe in God. God is perfect. If the planets move, they got to move in circles. So he started taking a look at the data that was put together by a relatively unknown astronomer, except for the crater named after him, named Tycho Brahe. Tycho got the most spectacular crater on the moon. Tycho was I want to say he was a Dutchman who had a nose that was made out of wax and silver. He had his nose hacked off in a duel or something. And Tycho was not a theorist at all, but Tycho did have the most accurate measurements of the time. Tycho had an observatory, and he was making extraordinarily precise measurements of the position of the planets over time. He had a database is what he had. Kepler goes to work with Tycho, and there's a lot of friction there, back and forth. So anyway, to make a long story short, Kepler finally takes a look at this data, which is true. The data is real. Danish, thank you. The data is real. The data predicts where the planets are going to be, but there's no theory to explain it. So Kepler starts cranking the numbers, just starts crunching the numbers in his head, on paper, starts doing this insane amount of math. And what Kepler realizes is that there's no way that these observed external positions can make sense with circles. When you're trying to justify the Earth-centered model of the universe, with the Earth at the center, and the planets rotating around the Earth, to explain things like the retrograde motion of Mars, they had the planets that were orbiting, but the planets were also orbiting in circles, and they developed this incredibly complex machine that simulated what they were seeing, but got more and more ridiculous as time went on. So the reason I think Kepler is so admirable is Kepler came to the point where he said, here's what the data says, here's my emotional belief. My emotional belief has to be wrong. It has to be wrong. I'm believing God, and I believe that God would only make perfect circles, but those motions are there. God put them there, so I'm wrong. What are we seeing? And the answer is we're not seeing circles, we're seeing ellipses. And once you understand that they're ellipses, then everything works perfectly. And Newtonian physics and the structure of orbits with Newtonian physics and Kepler as a guide is what allows us to hit a bullet with a bus. What allows us to fly a spaceship the size of a small bus into an asteroid orbiting an asteroid, astronomical units away. That's what did it. He took a look at the data and went with the data rather than trying to fit the data into his personal belief systems. And the more unlikely life becomes, the more unlikely a mechanistic explanation becomes. And I'm willing to do what Kepler did and say, everything I believed about this may be wrong. What does the data show us? If you were to take a look at this without the emotional bias of all of this, and this is one of the most heavily weighted emotional questions in the entire human experience. But if you simply just put it out on the table and talking about the weight of various kind of fish or something, then you would say, well, the evidence for this is stronger than the evidence for that, and as new evidence comes in, that balance changes. But yes, and that's a great point, by the way. Asa Findi said Kepler would be censored by social media today. Absolutely. Kepler could produce his theories, his equations matching the data. He could do all of that stuff, put it up on YouTube, and he would be banned and canceled because it didn't agree with the science. Because it didn't follow the science. The science says that these are perfect circles, or the science says that the Earth is the center, and the reason they'd ban Kepler would be they would say 99.999% of astronomers all agree that the Earth is the center of the universe, or that the planets move in perfect circles. So Kepler's spreading disinformation, and therefore he's got to be banned, right? Got to be banned. Can't be discussed. Got to be banned. That's what they say when they say, well, you're a denier about vaccines, you're a denier about this, you're a denier about that. Look, I was looking at the comments and ran into some more, not many of them, but some moon landing deniers, and I thought, I don't need these people silenced. I'll have 10 minutes with them, and I'll beat them in court. I'll beat them with evidence. So anyway, that's that. I think I'm done for the night. I know I didn't get to some questions, but there you go. I did get the 3-word question, so that's that. It's pushing 3 hours anyway, 2 hours and 50 minutes. So I think we'll wrap this one up. I do have a couple of things that I have to do here before I can go home, and GK Masterson, I did see your question in the comment section there. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Just send me an email. And I'm sure we can work that out. Send me an email. I'll copy it to our operations manager, and we'll set up a time. So I said that before you put the frowny face up there. Yeah, Pope did that to Galileo. They put Galileo in prison, and furthermore, they did what they have to do today. They not only convinced him that he was wrong, but they made him recant. They made him apologize publicly. He had to go out on the Oprah Winfrey apology tour. No, I was wrong. I was completely wrong about that. Terribly sorry. Of course, the Vatican's right. So anyway, all right. So I've got a real good target for hopefully next week. At least in terms of things to do, it helps us. BillWhittle.com. It helps us with the colonies. I'm gonna see about getting one of those photo scan heads done with the 52 blend shapes, and then see how accurate I can get that looking, how realistic. We'll take it from there, I guess. Yes, and Pied Pfeiffer says he recounted publicly but not privately. He said, nevertheless, it is so. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. All right, that'll do it. Thanks, my guy. Thanks, Guy. Hey, my guy. Hey, good to see you. All right, so I'm going to wrap this puppy up here and post it, and I got to get something else ready for tomorrow. Then I'm going home. Be back tomorrow. We shoot our right angles tomorrow. I'm losing it fast, going fast, folks. Okay, the show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com, to whom we are eternally grateful, and who I am trying to entice some people to come back and some new people to join. So we got to have something to show people, so we'll see. Yeah, that'll do it. So until next time, until next time.